Morning, honorable members. Morning, Minister GM and the DG and the entire team, officials in attendance. Today we're going to receive a briefing on the two critical matters that were dealt with extensively in the sixth administration, and I think those that were still or were leading the department. Minister, they would have said that there was extensive briefing from the minister and work that was done by the department in terms of consultation on the white paper. And our understanding is that it has gone through the executive process, including cabinet approval, and other issues that are left is to develop a bill that must be brought before Parliament so that we're able to interact with members of the public and stakeholders to further comment so that we deliberate and have an intensive discussion in Parliament. This is an important piece of legislation once considered by Parliament. And also to deal with the matter that resides on Vulindlela recommendation in relation to the work of Home Affairs. And I think there are identified areas which have been raised and the work that has been done by the collective led by the former Director General of Home Affairs. Minister and Deputy Minister, listen carefully during the security cluster comments or responses on the intention of the department to and I'll say deliberately, you will interact when we comment, to bring the bill in the year 2027. And I think it's a concern that we may need to register that given the urgency and the challenges that the country is facing, including security issues, and also the economic impact that may contribute to the delay of this bill that as a result of the white paper. It will be important that this committee, as we deliberate, and yourself consciously, you must note that concern that one has observed in our discussion. I think it's an important area that we may need to collectively, both as the members of Parliament and yourself as the department, fast track this process. I've also gone through the Vulindlela recommendation in relation to this matter. And I'm fully aware that there may be other issues that may need to arise to the white paper, which may need to go through the same process which yourself, you are aware in terms of cabinet subcommittee and cabinet. But as we are now, we are clearer in terms of the process that we must develop a bill that may need to be considered by Parliament. We're not going to waste time, given the challenges that we're facing as a country, to delay the work of the department, including the white paper. So I'm just trying to highlight key issues that we'll be confronted with as a committee and the collective. And this is the area that we've interacted with the former minister and the team in the year 2020 in terms of the declaration of this white paper. We are happy that Cabinet has now considered the white paper. I'm in particular on the time frame and the period that we may need to agree on. Without waste of time, I will then invite, I will suggest that the program on how we're going to deal with it, members. One is that we'll request the department to deal with two items at once. Item number 3 and item number 5. Then we'll comment both the white paper briefing and the Vulindlela, then we'll comment on questions. And then we'll deal with the update of the provincial public hearing and the details, and also the briefing on the third program of the committee. And then we'll then adopt the minutes. Is the proposal accepted, members? Okay, thank you very much. and welcome other members who have not been in the meeting. I think the first time we interact together, but are those that have been seasoned in Parliament, so we are familiar with our interaction. I will just take this advantage to introduce Mr. Matonsi, just introduce members who have not been with us so that they are familiar with the collective of the team.
Morning, members. We do have members, new members. Reverend Mishwe is not a new member, as the Chairperson has indicated, but also it's the first time him attending this meeting. That's Reverend Mishwe here on my right-hand side. And then there is Mr. Hala. Also, yeah. That's all, Chair.
Thank you. Is there any apologies? We must register.
Yes, Chair, we do have two apologies. One from Ms. Mohamed. She indicated that she was not feeling well. Then the other one is Ms. Mitono. She just landed at the airport at 9:30, so she will be here at the meantime. Thanks, that's all from my side.
Minister, any apologies? Must register.
No, Chair, I think we've got a full house.
Thank you very much. We'll now invite the Minister to introduce, or delegates to introduce, the two presentations. All apologies have been recorded. Then we'll interact on responses and comments, and members will have enough time to deal with the presentation.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair, Honourable Members. Good morning also to those members that are joining us in this committee today for the first time. And also good morning to the DM and the team from the Home Affairs Department. Chair, you will know that I am very much able to introduce, but I think we're starting to become very familiar with each other in this committee. So I think what I would like to just very briefly touch on before I hand over to the team is maybe just a high-level view on both of these items, if I may. Because I would like to express my gratitude to the Chair and to the committee for actually scheduling these ones on the same day, because it's going to illustrate the interplay that actually exists between these two processes. So I would urge members to look at these things as connected, because they are dealing essentially with the same space. And that space really involves the high-level view on the immigration system, citizenship and refugee protection that comes from the white paper, first of all. The process, Chair, is correct, as you've outlined, that this went through Cabinet in April, and at one of the subsequent meetings, the minutes also served, and you could see that there were quite a number of points that were raised in that Cabinet discussion, and pointers that were given to the department to say, go and refine this, go and add in this space. So we've got that as one of the major inputs on the white paper that we will then need to process to go forward with into the bill. I think the other important input, of course, is from Operation Vulindlela itself, and that's where the interplay will become clear, where we have the opportunity to supplement some of this work through making sure that the legal changes actually align with what the President and the administration have put on the table. I think one thing that's very important, Chair, to caution against is we should not have a misalignment between what the Presidency and this department is doing in terms of modernizing Home Affairs and reframing our systems and the white paper itself. And so I think that even as we move into this space, it's important to get it right at the start, because what we don't want is a bill that comes to this committee and then we've got the Presidency, for example, saying to us, but this is misaligned with the work that Vulindlela is doing. So the supplementation process flows out of the need to make sure that we have really concrete and correct alignment on these issues. There's also a legal opinion that we have commissioned on the white paper to make sure that we are covered and really comply with the injunction we've got in the statement of intent as well of the government, that we must always make sure that we align with the Constitution. And I think that's an important point, actually, Chair, as we deal with international matters. Our primary injunction here is to comply with the South African Constitution. There's all kinds of international spaces out there, but I think we need to check our policy and legislation always against what our Constitution itself demands. And so it's in that space that we will also then get that opinion. So, Chair, essentially we will then move as fast as humanly possible, we've heard you there, to supplement and make sure that the priorities of the 7th administration, the work of Operation Vulindlela, the legal opinions are all commissioned and aligned so that we have the best product at the end of the day. I also want to emphasize, Chair, that this is an enormous scope that we're talking about. I would liken it to major reforms in health, for example, or education. It's actually at the same scale. And so it is absolutely critical that we get it right, that we don't have a process that gets thrown out in court, because that will actually be the worst outcome we can imagine, because then we'll be worse off than we are today. So we need to make sure that, given the scale of this is not like the marriage bill, with all due respect. This is not like the immigration amendment bill that we're dealing with. This is a complete systems relook. And so we have to pay close attention to detail and make sure we get it completely aligned. Then, Chair, I think the other point worth making is on Operation Vulindlela itself. And you will see from the presentation that there are elements in that work that will require regulatory change, first of all, but then also feed into legal changes and legislation. I must say, Chair, I'm very excited about the opportunities we've got through the work that we're doing with Operation Vulindlela. I think the DG will attest that we're moving with real speed to give effect to this priority that is really one of those cross-cutting opportunities we have in government, because what we see with Vulindlela is the ability for us to bring together views from different departments and make sure that when we talk about unlocking the skills that the country needs, for example, unlocking tourism, that we're able to actually do that and create jobs and economic growth in the process. That is really the apex priority of this administration. And so we believe we've got a very strong contribution to make in this space. Just to give you a sense, Chair, the trusted tour operator scheme that that the department will elaborate on, it's got the potential to unlock the Chinese market, for example, as well as the Indian market. A country like Australia is getting about 1.4 million Chinese tourists a year. We're getting about 93,000. Now, there is no reason why anyone would go to Australia if they could come to South Africa. And what we've identified there is the bottlenecks that are created, sometimes through very basic things. I mean, Mandarin documents that we cannot interpret or understand. So it gets into that kind of granular detail where we then say, also because these Chinese, they travel in large tour groups, so you'll get 100 or 200 applications at once. And we need to just rethink how we deal with that. And so that's where we've come up with a trusted tour operator scheme, which will vet and secure the tour operator and say, if you bring someone here who overstays or breaks the law, you will actually bear the consequences. So then we are able to process those group applications more effectively. And I really believe if we can get this off the ground, we will see a major impact in terms of boosting tourism in a relatively short period of time. So that's an example of where Vulindlela has real opportunities in the immediate term. But then, of course, Chair, we need to make sure that if Vulindlela is saying to us, this is one of the reforms we need in the tourism space, that we actually have it enabled in the legislation. And that's where you can see the link between the two and why it's so important that we have that supplementation process to make sure that we actually align with those kind of priorities. So, Chair, that's a mouthful, but I would invite, if I may, the DG to take over from here and fill us in on the details and really highlight, I think, some of the exciting opportunities we've got in this space. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's one matter, Mr. Matuns. I think there are some members who are requesting a link for this meeting. if you can just pay attention to it on the group of the... I was assisted by the Deputy Minister that this meeting is physical. I thought when I landed, I just trying to reach my place. So I think Mr. Matun seems Adam, can you deal with that logistics so that we don't account to members? It's a serious matter. DJ?
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honorable members. Good morning, Minister, Deputy Minister. Maybe just to indicate that the team, for those that might not be familiar with the team from Home Affairs, on my extreme right, it's DDG Thomas Sigama, is responsible for civic services, which means your IDs, passports, birth, marriages, and so on and so forth are with them. And then acting DDG, Mr. Matthews, immigration services, visa-related queries, law enforcement. And at the back, it's Mr. Yusuf Simons, who will take members through the presentation on Operation Vulindlela, the implementation thereof. He's the PM for the Western Cape Provincial Manager, but he's also project manager on Operation Vulindlela. And then on my immediate left, it's DDG Tulani Mabuso, who's responsible for operations. Will take us through the white paper on citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection. And at the back, Advocate Pelelani Kumalo, head of our legal services. Next to him, it's Sihle, responsible for policy. I think towards my immediate right at the back, Kayagazi from the DM's office, and Dwayne Isao from the Minister's office, the spokesperson, and then Mosi, and then Smamisa as well from the DM's office. I think I'm missing Advocate Gao, who's sitting behind Reverend Michelle, yes, is the PLO for the Minister. So for the first presentation, Chairperson, Mr. Mabuso will take you through this presentation, but what we wanted to highlight is really the following. Firstly, it's the key policy and legislative reforms that are currently underway. But in addition to that, also to highlight that there's a number of priorities that the presidency is leading on, including issues around digital transformation. And to that extent, they've set up an intergovernmental team that is working around issues on digital transformation. And of course, we need to take that into consideration. And the second one is the milestones that we've traversed over a period of time on the white paper on citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection. And then he will also give you an overview of the white paper. But critically, it's a key policy recommendations. And thereafter, the Minister spoke about the medium-term development plan priorities. There are 3 priorities that have been identified, and the team will be able to take you through those. And then, of course, we have to align ourselves with that. And then the next one will be on Operation Vulindlela. The Minister did indicate that there were 8 policy recommendations that were made. 4, of course, are legislative, and the other 4, it's process or systems. We have been able to implement 7 out of 8 of those. We're just finalizing the last part, which is more on the technology, and the others we have implemented. But critical is the fact that in the State of the Nation address, the President also spoke about further visa reforms. And to that extent, the Presidency appointed a team called the Genesis to look at what else can we do to do exactly what the Minister was referring to. How do we bring in more tourists? And that team is working on a number of options that at some point will come back and indicate what is it that we're doing with regards to that. So over to Mr. Mabuso through you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. Thanks, Chairperson, Minister, and honorable members. So as DG and Minister have indicated, the purpose therefore today was to take the portfolio committee just to note the process, and as DG has indicated, a number of areas that I'm not going to spend So the process in relation to the white paper, Chair, I just want to take the members just one step back to say that when we conceptualized the white paper on citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection, it was because in the past, Cabinet had approved a white paper on international migration. But owing to a number of developments that see people who carry certain immigration documents like visas, permanent residence, that creates also a pathway to citizenship. So it was therefore imperative that we look at actually creating a legislation that covers all those three areas, because you also have refugees who qualify for citizenship at some point. So therefore the issue of dealing with one legislation and repealing all the others was quite important. So we just highlight here the base documents that we utilized, including that Cabinet approved international white paper on international migration in 2017 and the other legislation that are relevant to that. We went through a process of the green paper in 2021-22 where we had a lot of extensive consultation. We went to various clusters in government, and also obviously, as DG has indicated, in the 2 previous financial years, there was a ministerial report on the issuance of visas and permits that was highlighting a number of areas that we needed improvement. And then the minister's comment on the issue of Operation Vulindlela, that led to the revision of the white paper. And then in the previous financial year, we had to go undertake a process of public consultation across the country with various stakeholders. The recent one which we did also early this year was a workshop on international migration with mayors and traditional leaders, which was held in Boksburg. So some of the key policy and legislative reform, I think Minister has made an indication on that. I'm not going to repeat on the issues relating to Vulindlela, and also the introduction of the remote work visa and startup visas and the trusted employer scheme, and also one of the key areas around the issue of enhancing the travel into South Africa is the creation of the electronic travel authorization in order to enhance the visa. Most countries doing that. For an example, the UK, they do that for certain countries. If South Africa, for example, we've got a number of countries that are visa exempt. So meaning that if we were to introduce an electronic travel authorization, in other words, we're giving a notification ahead of time who to expect, even though they don't have to bring a visa, but the fact that they actually notified in terms of that electronic travel authorization. When we look at the UK, for example, they also charge about £10, for somebody to apply for that. Then the next one is around the one-stop border post policy. This white paper has already been approved. There are certain obvious components of the policy that require legislation to be passed, but also there are those that allow us to start engaging with neighboring countries in terms of creating a process to establish common zones, common control zones in the one-stop border post, and also the OSPP has since been tabled in Parliament after Cabinet passed it last December. And Chair, I think this one on immigration amendment, we have been dealing with the issue of Section 34(1) B and D, which obviously was declared unconstitutional by the court. So again, that has since been tabled in Parliament. So all of these, obviously, are current policy and legislative reforms that are currently underway that need to be taken into consideration, as the Minister indicated, that this gives rise to the amendment to a certain part of the policy in order for us to draft the legislation. So at a high level, Chair, I'm not going to deal with some of the specifics, because we thought we should just summarize the issues that are coming out of white paper without being exhaustive, but just to indicate the context within which this white paper was developed, and that it was approved, obviously, by Cabinet, as Minister has indicated. There were a number of consultations that I've also made reference to. But also, Chair, just to emphasize the point, as the Minister did indicate, that the complexity of this is at a high level. So therefore, issues around constitutionality become very important, so that you don't create a legislation or policy that will be not be in line with our Constitution. So there are a few policy positions that are contained in the white paper, which will just at high level again talk about those particular areas. Chair, as I've indicated, on citizenship, the major policy reform that we are dealing with is that the white paper recommends that the Citizenship Act, Birth and Registration Act must be repealed, and be included in single legislation dealing with citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection in order to remove some of the contradictions in the path towards citizenship. So that's one area. And the second one was around the criteria for granting of citizenship needs to be reviewed. Other countries obviously have developed a restrictive naturalization approach, so limiting those who contribute, limiting to those who contribute to the economic development of the country. In this instance, ours was more of an academic exercise, of an administrative progression, that you get work visa or study visa, you move to a PR, you move to citizenship, sometimes attracting people who are not contributing positively to the country. Because also what this leads into, pressure on social protection, where, for an example, the countries ought to provide, whether is it old age social protection grants and other related. So those resources being constrained, therefore creates huge challenges to the country. That is why ours is to say those who are contributing positive in terms of critical skills, therefore they're quite important. Chair, this slide just shows the current types of visas that we currently have, which we refer to obviously under the Immigration Act. Then you've got functional services, which are temporary waivers, and then the categories of PR. This on the right-hand side, Chair, is just to show permanent residents that there are those that we get through Section 11(6), general work, criticals, and so forth, and also the sort of what one would regard as permits under the Refugee Act, which is asylum seeker visa and the refugee permit. So as Minister has indicated, we need to obviously align with some of the changes that the Genesis report is talking about in order for us to ensure that we either scrap certain types of visas and also improve some of them and introduce some of the new visas like the remote work visa. So as we review these, the new ones obviously will be coming on board, and then we'll be removing obviously those that we believe that they are not making economic contribution into the country. So the first part that we are raising as a major policy reform is that the number of years that a foreign national has resided in the country will no longer be a main determining factor for granting permanent residence. Periodic invitations for qualifying foreigners to apply for permanent residence will be introduced together with a point-based system. Then the policy framework also affirmed the use of critical skills lists to attract international migrants with skills and qualifications that are in demand. I think this is quite an important area. Also, the introduction of a limited duration permanent resident permits linked to obviously minimum investment. And also the policy framework must provide for the establishment of the Immigration Advisory Board that will advise the Minister on policy and legislative matters. In the current legislation, there is a provision for Immigration Advisory Board, but we are saying that that must not be lost, because I think how it was constituted previously and what the Minister's vision is to be able to attract the kind of individuals that will be able to have the required expertise to be able to help us to deal with these issues, and also at a distance, at the arm's length, and be able to advise looking at what international practices are. But also the policy framework also legislation requires that an establishment of immigration courts, chairperson, this will obviously be a matter that we'll have to deal with together with the Department of Justice, because I think if you look at the issues relating to immigration, the issue of interpretation of some of the legislation in relation to immigration, there's been a number of challenges that we have had. For an example, when the Section 34 was declared unconstitutional, one of the issues was that if people are arrested for deportation, we need first to get a confirmation from the magistrate. So that created huge challenges in terms of the courts. At some point, magistrates were not willing to help in that regard. So if you're dealing with immigration court, therefore, you are able to create a space that they are specifically for that particular area. Obviously, that comes with some of the costs that will be associated with that. Then the last part on this section is in around the border management authority. We are saying that when we look at some of these policy reforms that we are proposing, obviously they will impact on the BMA legislation, so we will need to just to review it to align with the new policy reforms. Chair, this slide, we just brought it in just to demonstrate that under refugee protection, it's just to demonstrate the trends that we have had. In 1998, when the legislation was enacted, the South Africa registered about 11,135 asylum seekers who applied for refugee status. And again, that number kept on continuing until the 2008 economic meltdown, where that number actually went up to over 200,000 in 2008 and 2009, when we saw a huge migration to the south because of economic meltdown. And interestingly, when you look at this number, a majority of the people who applied for asylum during that period, and actually across the years, the approval rate of asylum seekers as confirmed refugees is sitting just below 6%. So about 94% of all those who claim asylum, actually those cases are found to be maliciously unfounded or abusive claims, so to say. So what then happened in this period, which I always want to give context around people when you look at people who are carrying asylum papers, is that the legislation at the time required that the Refugee Appeals Board, which is currently now called the Refugees Appeal Authority, at the time the legislation was saying members of the board need to sit as a quorum to hear an appeal, meaning that if you have 5 members of the Refugee Appeals Board, they must sit as so 3 of them must hear one matter. Now, if you're sitting with over 200,000 matters or applications for refugee status after the first process by a status determination officer has been exhausted, the Standing Committee on Refugee Affairs has confirmed that this application is maliciously unfounded and abusive, then the person goes to the Refugee Appeals Board. So meaning that if members were to hear 20 cases a day, it will mean that in a week, which is 5 days, they will probably hear only 100. So meaning that that backlog kept on continuing. Hence, these people who were claiming asylum, they kept on then renewing their asylum seeker permit every 6 months, leading to some obvious staying for up to 10 years in the country. And then also in the process, they have children, they have businesses. By the time a person matter gets here and thrown out, the person is now going to raise another claim around the interest of the child and many other related matters. So that is why we are saying in the new legislation, we need to look at the convention to ensure that when South Africa entered the 1951 convention relating to status of refugees, we entered it without reservations. So we are saying South Africa must therefore consider the inclusion of the reservations in the convention and the 1967 protocols relating to refugees, status of refugees. But that must be done again in line with our constitution to ensure that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot by actually taking certain reservations that will be found to be unconstitutional. So that's a point that I think the minister is also trying to emphasize. So the new legislation also must enable the country to refuse the admissions of persons for whom there's reasonable grounds regarding as a danger to the security of the country. Again, we've had cases where people who have committed atrocities in the countries of origin, coming, claiming asylum, and South Africa being seen as protecting fugitives, international fugitives that are wanted by international law enforcement. So we work obviously cooperatively with Interpol and other agencies to ensure that such individuals. So we're saying that we need to be able to reject such asylum on the basis of that. The interesting issue, another chairperson that we want to, and members that we also want to look into, is the introduction of the first safe country principle as a precondition for admitting asylum seekers who have transited through safe countries. I mean, we receive asylum seekers from thousands and thousands of kilometers away and who have passed certain countries. Some will fly to certain countries connecting to South Africa, and then they claim asylum. So that's become an important issue to say that are we dealing with genuine asylum seekers in this instance, or is just a question of economic migrants utilizing a particular route to legalize themselves in South Africa? Those are some of the critical areas that we need to look into. Chair, there's a trend that we've also been seeing is that when somebody is illegal in the country, when they are being arrested for transgressing immigration laws, then they claim asylum. So we're saying asylum seekers in that instance must show good cause for their unlawful entry and presence in the country before we can deal with that particular matter. So I think it's quite an important area also that we need to look at. The last 2 points, Chair, is around refugee reception offices that must be located at the ports of entry in line with international practice. Because in many countries, if somebody comes to the port of entry, they claim asylum, the matter is processed there because the refugee reception office is at the port of entry. Fortunately with us, we only have one refugee reception office that is closer to a port of entry in Musina. The rest of the inland, in Pretoria, in Cape Town, in Gqeberha, in Durban. So most of those are processed close by. Well, with those coastal towns also, do not receive much asylum seekers that come through harbors. But we receive mainly, or seaports, we receive mainly through airports and also land ports. So those are some of the areas that we need to look into. And then also, we also need to reconfigure and capacitate our refugee status determinations and appeal structures in line with, again, international practice to ensure that the type of people that you appoint as refugee status determination office, some of them are legally qualified to be able to deal with those particular matters. And then to ensure that, obviously, the appeal processes, again, we don't want to trample on the Constitution because in terms of PAJA, as we issue out administrative decisions, we need to be able also to give reasons around. That's why the Administrative Justice Act compels us to be able to do that. So, Chair, as I conclude, therefore, it's just indicating that as a department, we have identified areas that require further strengthening of the approved white paper, and also to look at the government of national unity priorities, the medium development plan, and also the Operation Vulindlela report and Genesis. This obvious necessitates that we improve this particular white paper. So we are currently working on the supplementary policy paper that will be submitted to the Minister by end of this current financial year. So, as I said, the supplementary paper will also take into consideration the legal opinion which has been commissioned by the department. And also, Chair, we had tabled in front of the committee and Parliament in March this year an annual performance plan that has performance target, including to this area of developing a bill for citizenship, immigration and refugee bill. And therefore, it will mean that we are going to be reviewing this particular target in line with a provision that has been made to all government departments that they can actually review their 24-25 annual performance plan to take into consideration the priorities that have emerged out of the 7th administration. So that is currently being undertaken and will be retabled back to Parliament before the end of October 2024. Thank you very much, Chair. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you, PJ Mabuso. Can we now invite PJ, the last presentation?
Yes, Chairperson. The next one is on the implementation of Operation Vulindlela, which will be led by Mr. Yusuf Simons.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson. Good morning, Honourable Members. Good morning, Minister. Good morning, Deputy Minister, DG, DDGs, and everyone, all colleagues. Chairperson, yes, as yourself and the Minister indicated, there's a natural flow from the white paper into the Vulindlela report. So Mr. Mabuso touched on the Vulindlela findings and recommendations. So it's for me to go into the work that we've been doing for the past year and still continuing work as part of Vulindlela Phase 1. And we have now, Minister indicated, the Trusted Tour Operator Scheme, which forms part of Vulindlela 2, which we are continuing with. So, Chair, this is just a table of contents that I'm going to follow. As part of the executive summary and some background to the members that might be aware of this, that during the State of the Nation address of 2022, President Ramaphosa announced that South Africa will be reviewing our visa regime. And Chairperson, the Portfolio Committee would know that there were a huge outcry about the administrative burdens, the inability of Home Affairs to issue business visas, scarce skills visas, and the administrative red tape involved in applying for these visas. So this visa regime review was then announced. The visa review was part of 5 objectives of Operation Vulindlela, and this one looked at attracting skills and growth in the tourism sector that would ultimately grow the economy. So the review of the work visa review system aims at attracting the skills, as I indicated, economic growth, and importantly, improve the efficiency of the processing for issuing of visas and permits. The efficiency not only for the Department of Home Affairs Chair and members, but the efficiency for the applicants as well. So that we understand we operate in a global world where there's a competition for skills, there's competition for tourism, so Home Affairs had to review and improve our efficiencies to become attractable. Then Operation Vulindlela, there's a project office that was formed, and this project was led by the former DG, as yourself indicated, Chairperson, Mr. Mavuso Msimang, the former DG of Home Affairs. So just part of the executive summary, the recommendations report was first submitted to the department, to the Minister and the Exco in January 2023. It was handed over to the Department of Home Affairs. I know the final report was then submitted to the President in February 2023. The immigration branch was then tasked to drive and work with the presidency on a project basis to implement these recommendations. DG mentioned that there were 8 process recommendations and 8 recommendations, 4 process recommendations and 4 policy recommendations, which I'll go through. And we can say, and the presidency also announced in the conference in June, on Vulindlela Phase 2 to all government departments that Home Affairs is the only department that could almost implement all the recommendations from Operation Vulindlela. And we even received a letter of commendation from the President to the Minister on how the department dealt with the implementation of the recommendations from Vulindlela. So Chair, let me go to those recommendations. This is just an expansion on what these recommendations entail. The first process recommendation was to streamline documentation required for applications, and this is to reduce the administrative burden on applicants. There was a lot of complaints on the administrative burden, and we'll unpack it soon, Chair. The next one was to the Vulindlela team quickly identified that there's a chronic problem with capacity in the immigration unit, particularly in the permitting unit, Chair, and the committee would know that as a result of this chronic shortage of staff, a huge backlog was built up, dating back to 2014, which we are struggling with still, but we have a good plan now and there's great momentum on the backlog. But the President itself indicated and highlighted to us that together with Treasury that we submit a business case, which we did. We submitted a 3-year business case to Treasury and the Presidency. They asked us to submit a 1-year business case. We did that as well. We have not received the money yet, Minister, but DG and the Executive has made another plan on capacity, which I'll come through to now. The next one, which is the one that we have not yet implemented, but as members would understand, to modernize and automate the Home Affairs systems is not something that you do in 1 year. So it's a process. It's a probably medium to a bit longer term process. Started 2 years or a year ago, which I'll come back now on where we are with the modernization of the system. Then the fourth recommendation is a recommendation that's not, even though Home Affairs is highly dependent on this Employment Services of South Africa database administered by the Department of Labour and Employment. This is a key recommendation. This database the Department of Labour uses to give a recommendation for work visas. So the Department of Labour would look at this database to see whether there are unemployed South Africans. They would then either recommend or not recommend a work visa. Now if this database is not updated, there would be a serious problem because the recommendations would then, they would probably not recommend somebody for a post where actually there's a need for that particular job. So the Presidency then, they are dealing with this matter because this database they found is not updated, it's not reliable, and it is a big problem at this current stage. Now we get to the policy recommendations. The first policy recommendations, and these were key new areas for explanation for us as an immigration team to look at. The first one was the Trusted Employer Scheme that allows for employers to be vetted and to reduce administrative burden for employers as well. So there was an investment conference in April of last year, and before the conference, the President had a number of complaints from businesses that Home Affairs is stifling employers from bringing skills into the country, from growing their businesses, from creating jobs, etc., that we are not issuing those visas fast enough. So what was recommended is a Trusted Employer Scheme. It's an agreement and a relationship, a scheme, partnership developed between the Department and employers, where we share responsibilities, we share risks as well, and we ease the burden on employers. Now, Chair, I'll come later on what we have done with this scheme. I'm just giving an overview, so I'll unpack a bit more on how successful this scheme has actually become, and has become one of the flagships for Home Affairs, Chair. The sixth recommendation was introducing a points-based system. Now, the points-based system is there to streamline existing visa categories and introduce greater flexibility. A points-based system determines eligibility for work visas according to the applicant's ability to score above a certain threshold. And I'll pack this more, Chair. There's 2 slides on the Trusted Employer Scheme and the points-based system. Because these are 2 fundamental recommendations, there's 2 separate slides, Chair, that unpacks this further. So I just want to introduce it, and then I'll come to the more detail later on at the end of the presentation. But this is a fundamental change. It brings flexibility, brings predictability, both in the critical skills area as well as the work visa area, and take away the issue of subjectivity. There's a lot of complaints that critical skills visas are being rejected. Now that decision-making is then replaced by a points-based system that gives complete clarity and certainty from once you're in a foreign country and you want to come for a work visa, you can actually determine whether you would get a visa, yes or no, yourself out there, not by officials sitting here and deciding on what criteria and how to adjudicate that particular visa. So it's a fundamental change that will come to Chair. The next 7th recommendation was on the critical skills list. Chair, this is an area that is also in the white paper, that there's been concerns and complaints that the critical skills list are not regularly updated, and it's not current with the developments in the country, with the environments, etc. So there was a recommendation that that should be updated on a more regular basis, and I'll come to that as well. The last recommendation was the introduction of 2 new visa categories. The one is a remote work visa. It's for nomads, nomad workers who want to work remotely in South Africa. Is the creation of that particular visa category. And the second one is a startup. A startup that makes provision for those entrepreneurs out there who want to or intend to establish or invest in South Africa, is to give them a pathway to come and, instead of creating or starting a business in the US or wherever, you come to South Africa because we have a particular visa now that will assist you to rather bring your entrepreneurship and your skills to South Africa and start it here and then create jobs. So, Chair, that's just the policy recommendations, and now go to the detail, the progress, and what we have done in terms of those recommendations. So, first recommendation, if the members can still recall, is that on the streamlining of documents. This is the process recommendation. So there was a huge problem with radiology reports. There's a shortage of radiologists in South Africa, so that was the area that created a big problem. The second one was on the registration with professional bodies. When engineers, doctors need to register, a huge hold-up. They would wait for more than a year to get these certificates and then couldn't apply for a visa. That was a bottleneck. The third one was on a police clearance certificate. Now, the old regulations had that from the age of 18, when you turn 18, you have to have a police certificate for any country you've been in for longer than 12 months. So if you want to come, for example, retire in South Africa at the age of 60, you might have lived in 10 countries for more than 12 months. You'll then have to bring 10 police clearance certificates from all over. By the time you get the 10th police clearance, your first one that should be valid for not less than 6 months would expire. You need to go back and get it. So it was a huge administrative burden on applicants. So all of these we have changed. All of this have been completed. The radiology report has been removed from the second draft of the regulations published on the 20th of May. Now, for registration with professional bodies, if you have proof that you've applied for registration at the Engineering Council of South Africa, for example, we will then issue a visa for 1 year. Once you get the certificate, we'll then extend it for the period of your work at that. So that has also been completed and implemented. The third one now, police clearance. So only for the last 5 years, so same that person who wants to retire at the age of 60, only from the age of 55, if you have stayed in a country for more than 12 months, you need to bring a police clearance from that country. If not, you only bring the country of your origin. So this has also reduced that, removed those administrative bungles. So this, we've ticked off, completed, done and dusted in the regulations. The next one I've touched on briefly is the second recommendation that's still work in progress. That is the modernization of the IT systems and the digital transformation that Minister has put as a priority for the department. This is what we are pursuing. Unfortunately, with the IT tech capabilities within the department, we had to go to CETA and enter into an MOU for CETA for external assistance. Also, we are currently working with SARS. We are currently working with business, including banks, to assist us with the modernization of IT systems. As I indicated, it's not something we can do in 2 months. There's an integration of systems, there's the modernization of systems, digitization of systems, and I'm sure DG can also unpack more on the huge efforts, and Minister can also on what we're doing in the IT front. But it's something that Vulindlela has picked up, that we have acknowledged in Home Affairs, and that we have started to move in, coming with proposals to also address that. Then the third recommendation is on capacity. And members would still recall that I indicated that we submitted all business cases, both to Presidency and Treasury. We then had to go and look for partnerships through Vulindlela, through the Presidency, with First Rand Bank, to augment our capacity constraints we have in immigration. And we are glad to say that we have entered into a MOU with First Rand Bank, and there's 35 resources on board currently, Chair and members. They came, they first were trained. On the 14th of August, they started on the backlog. Up to yesterday, they have completed 4,023 applications in 1 month. This is 35 resources. And as we know, Chair and members, once you start, it starts slow. So we know they will pick up pace, and we know that they will make a huge impact in the backlog, so that our current staff can look at incoming work, can also focus on the new visa categories that we are creating here as well. So on here we say completed, because there's a 2-year assistance program for graduates that we're going to source from First Rand Bank, and we're looking at other options also to augment our capacity, seeing that we have austerity measures in government and we do not have the funding to create posts within the Department of Home Affairs currently. So we have ticked that off as completed, because we have 35 resources on board, focused with one account manager supervising them and making sure that the quality assurance happens there as well. The fourth recommendation, as I indicated, is the Employer Services of South Africa database. Here there's no requirement from Home Affairs to intervene, because Presidency is dealing directly with the Department of Employment and Labour to make sure that this database is updated and reliable, Chair. Then the fifth, now the last three recommendations is the key recommendations that brings new visa categories and new approaches to the way we are managing our visa regime. The first one is the critical skills list, Chair. Now, the last time the critical skills list was updated was 2014. The critical skills list must be updated every 4 years. So that did not happen. In 2022, in August, the critical skills list was updated again, 8 years later. And then it includes veterinarians that we had to then include because we were approached by veterinarians and the Nursing Council to look at certain categories that we had to include. In September 18 September 2023, we updated the critical skills list again, Chair. This time we removed certain requirements for professional body membership for university lecturers. Honorable Lewis would know, he used to send us many emails that lecturers do not belong to professional bodies, and it was a problem and their visas were rejected. We then updated the critical list, and now lecturers do not the requirement to be registered with professional bodies. We also included candidate engineers in the new update of the critical skills list. But suffice to say, Chairperson and members, that the critical skills list is not going to wait for 4 years anymore. It can be upgraded at any time if there's a request. The Minister of Home Affairs is the one who publishes. We work with the Department of Higher Education and Training. So already there is a move to look at the current critical skills list again, Chair. So that one we've ticked off as completed as well. Then this is the last three. The one that I'm going to speak a bit more now after this slide is the Trusted Employer Scheme. I don't want to talk much about that. It's one of our flagships. We have 71 corporates accessing visas fairly quickly through that process now, and we'll start with the second cohort, Chair, in October. There's such a huge demand for us to expand the Trusted Employer Scheme that we are starting with the second cohort from 1 October to bring more employers on board, really to give them that skills to grow their economy, grow their business, create jobs, and grow the economy as well. Then, Chair, on the points-based system, it's been included in the second amendment of the regulations, but I'll come back to that point now on the next two slides afterwards. Then, recommendation 8 is the two visa categories. The one is on the remote work visa. There was a huge outcry, Chair, from the tourism industry on this remote work visa because it's a visa category that's been created all over the world, Chair. There's a competition, real competition for tourists and remote work, and COVID brought the concept of remote work here, and so countries are creating this visa category and we are aligning ourselves with that progression. Chair, it's currently in the second amendment of the immigration regulations. There is just a tax matter that we are currently dealing with SARS, because there are some tax implications that we need to clarify with SARS. I'm sure by this week we should have that clarified. The revised regulations, the third draft, would then also probably be ready by I actually have it with me as a draft, which we will discuss this week. But we envisage that very soon that draft, the third regulations would be published, and we will have clarity on the remote work visa. Once the third draft of regulations are published, Chair, it's just technical amendments. It's not published then for consultation. It's published for implementation. It becomes operational. Same with the startup visa, has been included as section 14.1. It's a sub-visa category of the business visa category, and that is for any applicant or business or foreigner who intends to establish a business in South Africa. We created that particular visa category for that, Chair. So we have also ticked this off as completed, as part of the second draft of the regulations, but as I indicated, we were forced to look at the third draft amendment, unfortunately because of the tax matter, but that is imminent, Chair. Let me now go to the next two. As I indicated, these are the two key recommendations. Together you could say with the remote work visa, but these two stand out as a trusted employer scheme. I've already spoken a lot about the rationale for a Chair, so I'm not going to repeat some of the things that I've said. It's basically just more for companies to attract skills and manage their migration needs much easier. And it introduces a trusted employer scheme relationship, department-employer relationship with employers that's vetted, that certain requirements are waived for them, and there is a trust relationship, but a trust relationship also based on consequences if there's misinformation or contravention on conditions of this agreement. Quite harsh ones, Chair. And one of the key ones is we kick them off the scheme. Now we know the biggest, let me say, not risk, concern for an employer is not a monetary fine. Is once you kick them off the scheme and there's reputational damage. That's what they're most afraid of. And so this is what we're pursuing with employers, Chair. The second one on the points-based system. Points-based system, as I indicated, it's certain scores. If a prospective employer wants to come and work in South Africa, there's a point system that they can actually calculate for themselves whether it would be eligible for a work visa. There's no subjectivity, there's flexibility, there's different pathways, Chair, but it focuses on factors like education level, focus on your profession, specializing, your wealth, your income, your language, etc., Chair. Suffice to say that the Trusted Tour Operator Scheme came into effect 1 March of 2023. There was 108 applications. The important thing to mention there, Chair, is not Home Affairs sitting in our corner adjudicating and deciding who should be part of the Trusted Employer Scheme. There was a selection committee that also developed the criteria and selected these employers. They went through a selection process, a vetting process, signed agreements, etc., Chair. And the committee constituted senior officials from Department of Labor, senior officials from Department of DTIC, and Home Affairs was chairing. And also the admin team comprised these 3 departments, Chair. So there was thorough consultation and cooperation, governance in this process. So as I indicated, a huge demand, and we will open up the scheme again in October. So, Chair, then the Trusted Employer Scheme, I spoke about 7135 were not successful. There were some applications that were incomplete as well. We'll do the second phase, Chair. We will look at broadening the requirements because some employers were saying that we might not have that huge number of employees that we're employing, but our contribution and the sector we operate in is key for South Africa's development, renewable energies, etc. So we look at the sectors again, but DTIC is guiding us in that particular area. Chair, in terms of the points-based system, I've also spoken a lot about how important this is, the flexibility it brings, and how out there the workers, whether you apply for critical skills or a work visa, needs that flexibility, Chair. So when they decide which country to go work at, which country to bring their skills at, they can get certainty from going to the website, do the calculation themselves, look at the qualifications, and then see, but if I go to South Africa, definitely I'll get my critical skills visa. There's no subjectivity there. That's the key point. So, Chair, importantly here is that we need to develop a points-based, the criteria for the points-based system. That's most important. The final criteria will be determined and published by notice by the Minister of Home Affairs. This is part of sub-regulation 12, that prescribes that the minister will determine the points to be allocated to each criteria and will be published in a notice in the Gazette. Now, the notice has not yet been published, Chair, but I can say that this morning we had a meeting with the presidency. We are 99.5% ready to come to Minister either tomorrow before the end of this week and say, Minister, this is the proposal through DJ and the Minister for the points allocation. Minister is the one who will then finally decide, but there is complete alignment between the presidency, ourselves. We have taken the points-based system. It went to NETLAC, Chair, it went to Department of Labor, to DTIC. So we did a lot of consultation on this, supported by the presidency, so we are very, very close in this regard. I don't want to put time frames there, but I don't see us going longer than September, probably mid-October, somewhere like this. But it's very important, and out there, the workers, the skilled persons are waiting for our points-based system to be published. Now, Chair, I'm going to show yourself and the members just an illustration of the points. This is not the final points. This is what points-based system looks like. It's sort of a dummy. It just gives an indication, an illustration of the points-based system. So this is what a typical points-based system normally look like. So it would have the criteria on the one hand. It would give you points for qualifications. The type of, if you level, this is just, for example, level NQF level 7 to 8, you might score 20 points. If you NQF level 9, 10 and higher, you can score the maximum points. Check. For example, offer of employment, you must have that. If you're coming from a trusted employer, you can score a certain point. We are really just, we put strategic economic sector there, but really that will be determined by those who apply, Chair. So that is just a dummy. It should not be there. It's just what some other countries also have, but what we considered. What will work in the South African environment. You can't take a points-based system from Australia or wherever in Canada and say, let's use it for South Africa. So this is some of the examples, but we'll have our own. Then the income is important, Chair. And the thresholds here is that these incomes were illustrated. It's illustrative of earlier this year when the presidency did some research on they've worked out what is the norm salary of South Africans. So the first category, you score 10 points if you earn double the norm, so that you don't compete with South Africa. You must score double the norm of what a South African would earn. And the third one of 900, almost R1 million, Chair, where you score 50 points is triple the norm. Now, this was done, I think, a few months ago. So when we come to October, we'll refresh that to again look at the labor market, we'll discuss with Department of Labor, look at the norm salaries, and again use the concept of double the norm and triple the norm for South Africans so that we still protect our job market as well. Then work experience, if you are 5 to 10 years, for example, you can score 10 points. If you are 11 years and above, you can score 30 points. That's the most experienced persons. And then language skills, proficiency in at least one official language, then you score 10 points. And that's just a description of what we'll be looking at. So if you score 80 points, for example, or 100, you can calculate. So if you're sitting wherever in the world and you have a master's degree, NQF level 9, you get 50 points. If you then earn more than R1 million, that's 50 points. Immediately you beat the threshold. You can apply for a work visa because you're going to get it. Because you are highly skilled, you're a high earner, which means you are most valuable asset for where you are. So you come here and those people will create jobs here. So this is what the points, just an illustration of what the points-based system would bring, Chair, and which is so important. With critical skills as well, we'll use this instead of officials sitting there and you have the skill, but somehow there's some administrative areas that reject it. It comes to a rejection, and that's what we find, Chair. So this is for us also one of those game changers, as they call it, for what, Chair. So just, I'm not even going to touch much. I think I've touched on the benefits of Trusted Employer Scheme, many benefits of the points-based system, Chair. So with your indulgence and because of time, I think I've touched on these points. I just want to thank the committee and then submit the report for noting by portfolio committee. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much for that detailed brief, DG and the team. Members, these are the two important briefings that we must interact with. I will now invite members for comments. Honorable Rose. I will come for a second round if the members are still there. Honorable Lubani, Honorable Lopesan, Khojani, Honorable Mukhale, and Honorable Mutisemse, and Honorable Misho. Can you, in that order?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentations. I think there's some very exciting things in the pipeline there, and it's good to see that Vulindlela is finally being implemented after quite some time. I think the Minister rightly says that this is a lot that we're trying to cover here. Again, we're looking at three different pieces of legislation: the Citizenship Act, the Immigration Act, and the Refugees Act, and now trying to roll it all into one. And I'm glad to see there's a supplementary policy paper, because I think there were a few criticisms when this paper first came out. And the one was really that it wasn't necessarily evidence-based. There were spurious statements, broad statements that were made, and then a policy proposal was made. And I think certainly with the GNU, you know, a lot has changed since April. But certainly that thing of evidence-based policy making, that supplementary policy paper brings an opportunity to bring that in more, in justifying some of the recommendations. And then also another big criticism was the missed opportunity of immigration. I think, you know, the current government, one of the key, and probably the pinnacle objective of this current government is to grow the economy and create jobs. And this white paper missed a lot of that. And luckily, it seems to be here in the Vulindlela report. And so I don't really believe necessarily that a piece of legislation is what is needed to cover everything here. Some of it is indeed legislation and legislative changes. Some of it, or a lot of it, is processes. So we talk about things like persons overwhelming the health system, etc. And that's largely due to a number of not undocumented foreigners who come here, claim asylum. It's rejected at first instance, and then they spend 10 years in the system. And they are fully protected by the courts to go and work and take advantage of those services. And somehow in the past, even though the money has been made available, you know, there were complaints about not having money, and the UNHCR came on board. A lot of money was made available. It used to be that you have to have a panel of 3 lawyers. Now they reduced it to 1. But certainly to get that backlog under control, it's definitely going to help to deal with some of these things, instead of necessarily trying to go and change our participation in international law. I mean, you're really looking at a lot of the causes of these issues, and a pile-up is indeed backlog related and process related. So we even saw in that project with the UNHCR, there were inputs in terms of manual processes, files lying on the floor, adjudicator having to go and find the piece of paper that's missing in the document, etc. So a lot of these things can be dealt with with the system modernization, as well as basically process changes that can help to address some of these issues. I think certainly with the Vulindlela, the points-based system is the right way to go. My one question in that regard is just if you require a SAQA accredited qualification, what is the time frame? How long does it take SAQA to do that? Because I saw that it was 10 points or something like that, so it might not be critical. It might not be a showstopper, but I just want to get clarification. Is it a showstopper? Because you can have a fantastic system, and then you sit there with SAQA having a 24-month backlog. So I just want to get a bit of clarification on that one. And then I think a comment was made in terms of a shortage of staff. It was interesting to see that the banks coming on board and bringing students that could adjudicate visas. So I just want to get an understanding, because in the last term we had this issue of backlogs, and the minister said that we needed to hire these lawyers, and there were lawyers hired to deal with the backlogs, etc., etc. So I just want to understand what is happening with the internal capacity in that regard. If you are able to get students, the bank is able to get students and they're able to adjudicate visas, what is happening in terms of then training the internal capacity? Because from the many, many issues we get, it seems to be a lot of the problem is not that you have a big pipeline of things coming in. It's that you're looking at something again, many, many times, that was incorrectly adjudicated. So it came in, it was incorrectly adjudicated, now it goes to appeal. VFS is happy, they get another $1.5 grand to process the appeal, and then it is upheld on appeal most of the time. So I just want to understand in terms of that capacitation. I can't put two and two together. How can they be capacitated by FNB, etc.? Is that same capacitation happening in the department to make sure that there's less of those incorrect rejections? But Chairperson, just to close off, I think this is very exciting, and I'm glad to hear that it's almost ready to roll, because I think it's going to make a massive contribution to our economy and our drive to create jobs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Ross, for your contribution. One.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Chair, from my side, I think on most of the things have been covered by my colleagues, but I'll go through them so that I make sure that he covers exactly what I was thinking about. I think from my side, again, Chair, here we are as Home Affairs, again, trying to look good on paper, but very bad in practice. This is very good presentation. It's well accepted, Chair. And if you can go to the first world, it's a state-of-the-art presentation. It's where the country needs to be. But we're not there, even at all, when it comes to practice. We're used to these things in South Africa, where we come here with the excellent presentation, paperwork, excellent policies, excellent everything, but when we go to implementation, it's zero. So, Chair, I think the first presenter presented the trusted employer scheme and points-based system. I think that's what I was going to ask. I think we've clarified on that. What I will now move on to ask is to say, before we even embarked on the points-based system, are we embarking on it? Does it kick in after we've looked at local skills first, before we even get into the points-based system or the trusted employee scheme system? Before we move in it, we first need to look at the local skills, so that when we go there, we know that we failed to look at that skills locally. It doesn't exist. Because I see, Chair, even the presenter said that, I was shocked when they said that they've looked at this attracting the skills. Where he said they refreshed their local skills in 2014. The higher education refreshed that thing every year. There is a disjuncture again there. Higher education every year, all the sitters, they publish their annual report, the critical skills list, where we are short of and where we have an influx in. And then that's not an issue with the higher education skills, it's an issue with the Home Affairs, where since 2014, all these other years, where were they sleeping, not looking at integrating with the higher educations to make sure that their critical skills is updated annually. So that's where the disjuncture is, Chair. The critical skills list, I was speaking about it. And Chair, on another issue, we need to look at capacitating the BMA. We talked nicely here about this visa regime, but we have porous borders. As I emphasized earlier on, it's good when you look at the presentation, borders are porous. People are coming in as like they're going to their bathroom and go back to their bedroom. So borders are porous. We need to go back to basics, solve issues as it is before we come and look at the Ferraris and the Mercedes that are being presented here. That was my first on the first presentation, Chair. On the second presentations, Chair, we need to relook at reviewing visas. When is the cheap one going to be implemented? Because we're talking about reviewing the visas, reviewing the visas, but we don't talk about the cheap visas that needs to be implemented, which is critical as well when it comes to this visa reviewing. So colleagues talks about attracting the skills list, and the presenter spoke about integration with the Labour Department. Let's involve the higher education department as well in all of this value chain. It's critical, not only the Labour. The higher education is sitting with an NSF. They're sitting with an influx of skills that are not hired by the Home Affairs. It's a lot of kids that are unemployed. They have all the qualifications, degrees, but we speak of trying to look at somewhere else for skills. So there's a disjuncture between the Department of Home Affairs as well as the Department of Labour and the Department of Higher Education as well. I think that's what it is, Chair. The points-based system has been spoken about. And then, obviously, I think when the presenter spoke about looking at the countries that we're working with, obviously, to me, what kicks in was, I'm sure you were talking about the India and the China, where we're looking at, where these countries have an influx of their skilled people, where they're now looking at Africa as another market to come and bring their skills. The issue, again, there, Chair, is not about the skills. It's about the porous borders and the incapacitation of Home Affairs. If you go to Midrand, where the Chinese is contracting houses left, right, and center, there's a Chinese that has in the construction house a huge number of Chinese who are just doing construction work, building those buildings. And you're asking yourself, is that a critical skills list for people who can put bricklayers? So there's a problem there, Chair. All what I'm emphasizing is sometimes as Home Affairs, we look at the wrong things and fail to fix the right things. Construction workers putting bricks and cement, they closed off. They put them in the back of the truck and close them and bring them in. The major issues there, we need to look at our labor laws as well. It's not the Home Affairs, it's not the visa, it's a labor law. What they are saying to us is, they're saying our labor laws are more on a nanny stage to South Africans. The strikers and all those stuff. They say that the reason why we're bringing our own staff from India to here, from China to here, is because the labor laws there are tight. Here they are weak. So we need to fix where the problem is. That's all what I'm saying here. Our labor laws, I can wake up and strike it any day. Hence, even on the critical skills list we spoke about, Zimbabweans are occupying all our restaurants. And business owners have seen that loopholes. That these guys can't strike. They haven't joined any union. They can't do anything. So these are the things we need to solve. I'm not saying that our labor laws, we need to now treat our people in a bad way. I'm saying we need to look at how do we prevent people looking at Zimbabwean foreigners to employ more of them than South Africans. So those are the things, Chair, that I wanted to highlight. So again, I'm emphasizing, it looks very good in presentation, as for the past 30 years in this country. Good policies on papers, everything good. But when we come to implementing, we failed dismally. So that's all what I need to input, Chair, on this first round. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Ngubani. Honorable question.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm just going to start with the first presentation. I also want to acknowledge that the presentations were very well appreciated, and it gives a lot of insight that assists not only us but the public also. On the first presentation, I would just like to know, it was on slide 7, where the policy positions which were adopted on the white paper enjoyed wide support from the public hearings that were held in 9 provinces. Can we maybe get an idea of what the public were very much in support of? And those who had opposed, if there are certain details that maybe need to be re-looked at. I'm still on the first one. The critical skills that also Honorable Ngubane had mentioned, because both of us sit on higher education, there is a problem where we do not want the South African public to think that we are not considering them first, in the same manner that we also don't want to exclude people from outside, but South Africans will then get this idea that we are putting them last on the list. Oftentimes, the presentations, as we have seen today, is very important for the South African public also to understand. And then, for instance, like the critical skills, many of the students will feel that they shouldn't even be here to study if their skills are not being looked at. And it was mentioned that there's a positive impact that these skills can have. Honorable Ngubane also said that some of the skills, if you look at some of the companies, it looks like skills that our South African people might also have. And then how is it more positive that someone from outside would make a positive impact than somebody from inside? So in order not to erode the public trust, we need to just make sure that it is inclusive and that what we say does not upset our citizens. I'm going to move to slide 15, where it said that the asylum seekers should show good cause for the unlawful entry. What exactly would be good cause, and who is it going to be shown to? Because some of the details might be too vague or oversimplified. And again, in order to ensure that the South African public doesn't think that we're putting them on the back burner, perhaps we just give some more detail. On the second presentation, which is very much appreciated, on slide 6, if we can have some more clarity on how this will not be approved by a DHA official. And I understand from the Minister's last interaction with us, there was enough explanation of how officials themselves at DHA can, if I can use the word, they jippo the system, because it is a paper-based system. It is certainly welcome tentatively, but maybe if we can have an example of how this looks in real time when we digitize it. And then the collaboration with First Rand Bank Limited and Delet, I think, what were the decisions to collaborate with those two specific corporates? And what are the 35 resources that were mentioned? This is on the third recommendation. On slide 11, what was the overall feel from the public also? That is for the recommendation to introduce the new visa categories to cater for the remote workers. And what exactly is the SARS tax implication that was mentioned earlier? On the 13th slide, if we could have an example, I know that the speaker did show an example of a simulated points-based system. Is there a limit for the points? I know that there was maybe 50 points there if you are on an NQF level 10 perhaps. But let's say you reach all of them on a very good level. Is there a limit, or does it just continue climbing? And then are you considered one of the best outsiders out there? The 108 applications that were received, according to the department, is this enough, or would you have liked to have seen more of those applicants? And then, yes, I did ask about the limit. The second round of invitation for the TES that will be gazetted by the end of October, which is nearing, for us to have more feedback and also to encourage the public to be included there, because oftentimes they do not receive not the information, but the information in time to make their own public comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Kojan. Madam Kad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I want to start off with the last presentation. Just have a few questions around it. Firstly, I just want to understand this general work visa category. What exactly is that, and who gets granted that particular kind of visa? So just need clarity on that. And then secondly, it the presentation, we're told that the critical skills list was last updated in 2014. And we know that there's been a backlog in terms of approval of some of these critical skills visas. Now, last time when I checked that critical skills visa, there were some skills there that were listed as critical skills. For example, like a call center manager. How can a call center manager be a critical skill in South Africa? It was listed there. So I want to understand, in terms of the people that have been granted or whose visas have been approved as a result of resolving this backlog that Home Affairs is speaking about, Honorable Minister, can we be provided a list of exactly what are these critical skills that have been approved? Because you are going to find that while giving people are saying critical skills, but you know, when some of us, we hear critical skills, we think, hey, high-level engineering, scientific skills, and so on and so on. We don't think somebody who's coming here for bricklaying and call center manager. So let's get the list of who exactly has been approved through this process, Honorable Minister, where you are dealing with the backlog. So I would like us to get that report to see exactly which of these skills have been approved by Home Affairs. Also, this digital nomad visa that you want to introduce, we know that it is mostly the tourism sector here in Cape Town that want that thing. It's people who own tourist establishments who are pushing for that thing. What is the social and economic impact of that thing? Because already there are complaints that these people who are coming here as digital nomads, they are driving up the price of rental accommodation. They are pushing the cost of living in cities like Cape Town here. So what is the cost, the social and economic cost of having this particular category of visa that you want to introduce? Now I want to move on to this one of the white paper. There's been a lot of interest around this white paper on social media and around the country. It has ignited a lot of debates from various quarters. But I want to understand, Honorable Chair, we should not take a position that is going to be interpreted by our fellow Africans as being a very anti-African posture towards the immigration of African people in this country. Because it's a perception out there, whether it's true or not, but there's a perception out there that South Africa seeks to insulate itself from the rest of the continent, is bringing in stringent measures to stem the flow of particularly black migrants from the African continent. So that's something that we should also be mindful of, that we don't want that particular perception, whether it's true or not, but we don't want it because we are part of Africa, we are part of Agenda 2063, which promotes the free movement of our people in the rest of Africa? Secondly, what is the path to citizenship that is available for children of what you might call illegal immigrants who have been here in the country for most of their lives? They've been to school because they are allowed to go to school. I think the court said you can't turn them back if they don't have documentation. They've been here, they've gone to our universities, they've studied, they've done all of that. What is the path to citizenship that is available for those particular kind of people? Because we are told that citizenship is only the children follow the citizenship of their parents. But in these particular instances, is this policy going to address those particular issues to create a path to citizenship for the children of migrants? And also, you speak about the first safe country principle. Now, with this principle, basically what we are saying was that we don't want a person, like we had chairperson, of those CIA Afghanistani people who landed here last year, who were brought here by the CIA through Zimbabwe. We are saying we want to address those kind of issues. But now, here's a question. We have relations with countries like Palestine. Palestine is 1,000 kilometers away. I saw on the news a few days ago we're receiving some refugees from Palestine. So what is going to be the impact of our relations? Or how are we going to implement this particular principle in relations to our allies, countries like Palestine, which have been suffering for many years? Are we going to say, no, Palestine is 1,000 kilometers away from South Africa, you can't be granted the refugee status, you should try some Egypt or try Morocco and wherever? So how is this principle going to be practically applied in the context of South Africa, given the relationship we have with some of these countries? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ale.
Thank you very much, Chair. We appreciate the briefing on the white paper, and one wants to make an emphasis that the matters of immigration management and control are very serious and are concerning to many South Africans. Therefore, we fully support the immigration major policy reforms that were presented on slide number 12. These are reforms that would have necessitated or have provided the basis for the white paper to be persuaded or developed in the previous term. It is given that the asylum regime and the refugee and foreign nationals acquiring permanent residency or visas or citizenship is being done irregularly and inappropriately, due to the fact that our immigration laws have many weaknesses that has even allowed criminal syndicates, including human traffickers, to exploit and have strengthened their networks to take an advantage of our refugee and immigration system. And they carry out these acts nefariously with impunity. Therefore, we want to emphasize that the sooner we move with the process of dealing with these immigration reforms, the better. It is worrying that on the presentations, the time frame or a roadmap has not been thoroughly indicated. It is not sufficient. Therefore, the presentation, as good as it is, it does not provide proper time frames of where we are and how is the department planning to expedite the processing of the white paper. We appreciate also that the Vulindlela recommendations have been achieved, as indicated, that 7 out of those recommendations have been implemented. The question would be then that having had implemented those recommendations, what impact do they have? Are we able to say they have actually given, are they fruitful, or are they just recommendations that have been implemented on paper? Can the department be able to say, since they have implemented 1, 2, 3, such and such on the priorities of the Vulindlela has actually improved 1 and 2 on the system? The minister, in his opening, he also made mention of the fact that thorough consultation and legal opinion is going to be sought further. I think I was under the impression that we have moved further from that. I think thorough consultations, as has been indicated by some of the members, that even the public has expressed themselves and have showed concerns with regard to the immigration laws. I'm not sure what he implies when he says they must still then, as a department, go back and seek more legal opinion and do thorough consultation. What are those concerns that are worrying or necessitates that the department should now have delays in implementing what has been processed in the past? I'm of the view that the development of the white paper would have thoroughly been dealt with. The attraction of scarce skills investment or attracting investors in our country in order to improve the economy should not be above the security of our country. The immigration laws have a lot of weaknesses, so much so that from time to time, foreign nationals who are in our country irregularly or who do not possess the legal documents to be in our country can and are allowed to approach the courts in South Africa, and actually they would be successful, forcing themselves to stay in our country illegally. So the organizations that also represents the human rights have exploited these weaknesses that are in our immigration system and had ensured that anyone who wants and seeks to live in South Africa can do so with or without legal conditions being thoroughly assessed and processed. And as a result, it also causes the very same economy that we want it to improve to really have a lot of challenges, Chair. There is also, the presentation make mention of on visas, the startups. I just want to check, are there any monitoring mechanisms in place in ensuring or checking that these startups that are meant to come and create jobs, will they be beneficial to the country's economy? If the startups, and are there any limitations or time frames given to these startups that in a year 2 or year 3, if your businesses have not thrived and you have not been able to create a certain number of jobs, the conditions of your visas will change, or these are the startups who will be allowed to be in our country and they will forever be here under the impression that they are here to improve the economy or create jobs for South Africans, and they can stay for long as they can, whether or not that is impactful and whether or not that has been beneficial to the country. It does not matter, as long as they would have been able to successfully acquire their visas and over time be able to get permanent residence. Chair, I just want to make an emphasis on the time frames in us moving forward in implementing this white paper and seeing that we move towards the finalization of these immigration policy reforms. So if the department can really assist us in that regard and ensure that all the concerns that the South Africans have expressed in the past are really taken into consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Mudisi. Honorable Musha.
Thank you, Chairperson. Firstly, I want to welcome the presentations that have been made. I want to maybe ask 3 short questions. The first one, we have been told that the length of stay will no longer be considered when asylum seekers apply for citizenship. My question here is, how long does it take between applying for citizenship in South Africa and also the granting of citizenship? Because if there are no time frames, obviously, one wonders how we'll be able to sift out people with some motives. Maybe, as you know, that criminals and syndicates have changed the atmosphere of peaceful coexistence in this country. So when somebody applies for a citizenship, what is the time frame on average when they apply, between when they apply and when they get it? And secondly, asylum seekers must show good cause for their unlawful entry into the country. And I think there needs to be an explanation to this, because if somebody comes unlawfully in the country and then apply for citizenship, how does that relate to the good cause, if there's a good cause of entering the country unlawfully? And maybe the third one, police clearance is no more needed. It's no more considered. I understand that it caused headaches for a number of people. It took time, but to do away with it altogether, I'm not sure of the wisdom of that. We have a problem with criminals. Many of them, unfortunately, coming from outside. And the people are complaining. And there are many South Africans who think that they are not taken seriously. People who say we're sitting on a time bomb, there is some sense in what they're saying. There is some truth in what they're saying. People are upset. People are unhappy. People are talking about the porous borders that are not addressed in the white paper. So when we complain about porous borders, when we become victims of crime, I was a victim myself, not a few months ago. When the police did the investigation, they said they cannot trace the owner of the fingerprints, and their logical conclusion is that person is a foreign national. Now we hear these stories all the time. We are victims, and Home Affairs is not doing anything we see with our eyes. That says to us, your concerns are taken seriously. I have 6 cases that the police could not solve because foreigners are involved. I don't think this is fair to live in a country we call it our motherland with fear. You lock behind yourself when you leave your house, all the time. When you see some of them in the streets, you worry, are they coming towards my house? Where are they going? And so on. I know you are not the police, but I'm raising the question and concern of porous borders. Is there anything that the minister can say, we are doing 1, 2, 3, to ensure that we introduce stricter measures and that South Africans will not complain about porous borders? And lastly, one of the concerns, some of my colleagues spoke a lot about critical skills, and that in South Africa, bricklaying is critical skill. One of the reasons why these guys have to shield themselves, close themselves, is because they don't want South Africans to see how many bricklayers there, because they're upset. Now, the last thing I want to raise on this critical skills issue. Many public hospitals have more foreign doctors than local doctors. And then you ask yourself a question, when we see doctors and nurses protesting, and you're told there's no job, and then you go to this public hospital, you find these doctors who cannot even speak the language of the people. Now, you ask yourself the question, how can these doctors help your people when they cannot communicate? Because if the doctor does not know your problem, they cannot solve your problem. Intelligent as they are, they want to hear from you. So if there is no there's a communication barrier between these doctors and patients, how are these patients assisted? So I want to appeal to the minister and his team to be sensitive, to allow some industries to be occupied mainly by foreign nationals when we have people who are competent and skilled to can do that. Because otherwise, tension is growing and is brewing. So lastly, while I welcome the presentation we had, many laws we have in this country are very good on paper, but very poor on implementation. I wish that what we had today will be implemented and that our people will know that we have a new minister, we have a government of national unity that has raised hopes of people. That when we complain about porous borders in particular, that we are being heard. And for us to conclude we are being heard, we want to see with our eyes something being done, and we also want to read in our laws that the government, through Department of Home Affairs, is doing 1, 2, 3 to address the concerns of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable.
Thanks, Honorable Chair. I also welcome the report, except that as I was looking at the other side of the table, I could only see men. The executive is Muzi Wezinsizwa, and I should think that we need to correct that. Chair, maybe I might ask a question that was asked a long time ago. You see, during those good olden days, people would be staying in the camps, going to school, or staying in their residences outside the country. But in South Africa, it's the other way around. It's free for all. Now the question is, if we were to say, please round up all those without scarce skills and take them back to their countries, would that be possible? Because this thing is worrying the people of South Africa. That is free for all in their country.
Yet you've got our Home Affairs, there are immigration offices and officers, and by the look of things, nothing is happening. I can say the borders, we patrol them almost every day. There's Home Affairs, there's Border Management Authority, there's police, there's defense. But what about those inside the country? Because I understand there are areas here where you would say this is a Nigerian area. South Africans are not allowed to come in. Are they all having permanent residence in South Africa? This other area is Somalians. You see, if you are from the Bundus as Lalin, what is going to happen in the next coming 20 years is, you say, I'm in Madiba by clan. In the next coming 20 years, my clan name is going to vanish because these guys from outside marry our daughters and sisters, and they change their names, not to be Uala, to be Mohammed. So in the next coming 20 years, there will be no Uala in that village. Hence, when you look at these chat groups, you'll find one being proposed as a mayor in that area. What do we do about that? Let us not run away from, okay, not running away. Let us not be confused by this word xenophobia. Where does it come from? One day, people of South Africa will turn against us to say, we are tired of you, government of South Africa, we are taking over now because we have allowed our country to be what is today. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Honorable Tejan and Honorable Nash.
I arrived late, Chair, and I think that is why I don't have a mic. I think it must be corrected. We know how many people are coming here. Whether I arrived late here or I arrived at what time, I must have my own mic. I don't want to share with the Honorable Motis for obvious reasons. So, Chair, there's quite a lot of issues that I picked up from the conversations that everyone else has had. I want to suggest, Chair, on the scarce skills first. I don't know when was this list of the scarce skills presented to us, and I don't know when it was ever reviewed. I want to suggest that we get given that list, because you can't have a list that we received in 1994 being the same list that we're operating with. We just need to be very careful of having a list that does not change, because a lot has changed. So if you are talking scarce skills, you might find that we have covered a lot of ground. We are no longer in need of those scarce skills that is being mentioned here today. So I want to suggest that as a committee, officially we are getting that list, we review that list. We look at what is scarce skills. Because it's our responsibility as the committee, I think, to be able to review things that we see that are abnormal, if I were to put it like that. I was in Goodwood prison to visit a friend of mine who is in prison. Everyone who's in prison, by the way, says that I have not committed a crime. So I went to Goodwood to see a friend. He still says that I have not done anything. I was introduced to a male prisoner, who had a foreign national, who had committed a crime somewhere in Khayelitsha, but he finds himself in Goodwood prison. He says, I have not been to court, and it's many of us who are here, and the main reason is that they can't trace who I am. That's what he says. He says they can't trace who I am. I asked him, do you know who you are? He says, I know, but how did you arrive here if the country doesn't know? So, and I asked myself, okay, if that's the situation, we have a lot of foreign nationals in our prisons who are feeding off our system, who have not been found guilty of anything, who have not been tried. And our role as Home Affairs in that respect is nowhere to be seen. Because we are the authority in terms of those things of fingerprints and all of that, and who enters and who goes out. It's worrying, Minister, that we have such problems. The right people must be in prison for the right reasons. But if you find people sitting there just eating the whole day, nothing is happening to them, it gets to worry all of us, and it should worry all South Africans. So we need to really attend to those problems. I said in the last committee, physically, that I attended, Chair will remember, I said largely the problems of Home Affairs are created by lack of standards. I mentioned that the office Yasemtata, the office Yasemenling, do not have the same standards. Of course, because the other one is in a mall, the other one is just somewhere, in a shibin somewhere. Because that office is a shibin. So, how are we able to assess our work as Home Affairs if we have different standards for different towns or different offices? I even suggested, Chair, that when we go and do site visits, we must not tell Home Affairs where we want to go. Or they must not tell us where we must go. We must say, as Home Affairs Portfolio Committee, that we want to visit this area ourselves, so that we are not taken to a direction that looks better. We want to see where it doesn't look better. So we are looking for the same standards from Home Affairs. What I find in Palabur should not be different from what I find in Aitujo. I once told the DG here, you'll remember, we're dealing with the issues of long queues. You came here and reported that there are no long queues in East London. I demonstrated to him with a picture. And I said the problem with Home Affairs is that all your presentations are very good. But on the ground, it's a different arrangement. So I'm saying, Minister, it's the first time I'm speaking in your presence. I want you to be able to understand that there has been issues that we have been raising, which we think should be attended with immediate effect by your team. So, in basic education, today, scarce skills in South Africa is math and science. If that is not on the list, you must know we have a big problem. Members that sit in the portfolio committee on education, basic education, they'll tell you, schools do not have math and science teachers. We have to go and get outside. And most of those that we have found in Free State, they are coming from Ghana. Some of them were deployed or they worked in the Eastern Cape. The conditions were not favorable. They moved to the Free State. So the scarce skills we're talking about must consider things like what I'm saying, Chairperson. Math and science is a big problem. And we're not going anywhere as a country without producing those with math and science. This thing of border management is our implementing agency. As a department and as a committee, we established it, Chair. I don't know if we have made an assessment. I mean, we can't run something for the past year now, and we have not made an assessment in terms of its work. I don't know, like, I saw a BMA car between Butterworth and East London with a blue light doing those things. I was like, did we ever approve BMA to be police? Is there something that we're missing? The Deputy Minister.
On our minutes, when we speak on our minute, we talk about the issue of unannounced oversight visits. If it can, we can ventilate it on, because it's on the previous minutes when we speak on the minutes, because so that we discuss and close the chapter.
Okay, noted. I think we'll deal with that. I see it's arising also from Honorable Tejana. Honorable Mufan.
Move to the department. There's just one issue that I just wanted to also raise on the issue of citizenship, immigration, and refugee protection. We have a number of people in South Africa who are South African citizens, who are born of a South African mother, a South African father, but they don't have documentation to prove that they are South African citizens. They don't have documentation to prove that because of the 4,700 DNA tests that they need to pay for. I've received very heartbreaking cases, Honorable Chair, of young girls, young boys whose life has come to a standstill because they can't get documentation to prove that they are South African citizens. So I want to know on these presentations that we have received, how are we going to resolve those issues, particularly for the poor of the poorest? You can't expect a person who's unemployed, who's poor, to be able to pop out 4,700 rand for a DNA test. It's not possible. So what alternative path is available for these particular individuals? I've about close to 10 cases, Honorable Chairperson, which I will bring to the attention of the Home Affairs team here. So how are we going to address those issues? Thank you, Chair.
No, thanks, honourable members. I think you have dealt with most of the issues that we will request the department to respond and comment. And in this last matter, I'm sure DDG Sigama is preparing for that. There are three issues which we need to appreciate in relation to the porous borders. The fifth administration initiated a process on the basis of input from the public in relation to the porous borders. And we did create a legislation that introduced the Border Management Authority. And from that period to date, there's significant work that has been done. And I think as members of Parliament, we ought to appreciate significant move on certain areas, but acknowledge its weaknesses, which ourselves, in fact, in the two budget votes debates, we've also highlighted in terms of the significant funding from BMA to carry some of the responsibility. So I thought I might just take a reminder so that we don't ground this meeting on the matter that ourselves as Parliament, we've acknowledged from members of the public, introduced a legislation that established the BMA, the other weaknesses which yourself have raised here. So the matter is how we align the white paper in relation with the current challenges that we're dealing with. And I'm quite sure that when they were going to receive the annual performance of the Border Management Authority, some of these issues will arise and able to contribute and understand some of the weaknesses and progress that we've been made. And it's us, members of Parliament, that will listen to members of the public around this challenge to the Border Management Authority and took a decision to establish this entity. So I thought I must make that point to the member. Two issues, Minister, which are political. I think we don't need to play with words. You must say to the committee, you are referring to the GNU intent statement that creates obstacle for us to move faster, to develop a bill for us to be able to interact with members of the public. And in my earlier statement, I've cautioned that we'll listen carefully in terms of the responses we have given in the security cluster responses in terms of the period in which this bill must come to Parliament and be dealt with. When you listen carefully to the presentation of Vulindlela, it appears that most of the priorities that Vulindlela refer in relation to the Home Affairs are in progress or incomplete, and you may need to identify what is the obstacle that deter the department to conclude this process and to bring the bill to the Parliament in terms of the time frames that we need to deal with. Because GNU does not have a policy. It is a statement of intent, and this matter has been raised. We're running this white paper from the, what you call, the legacy report. So you must be able to say to these members of the committee, these are the critical obstacles that will delay us to make sure that we facilitate the bill that must come to Parliament. And I think that is we must just try to elevate this area so that there must not be confusion on how the executive and Parliament process its work from the 6th and the 5th administration. So there must be clear areas. Why are you saying this matter will come later in 2027, and whereas we've been dealing with this matter a year? And the understanding is that if the supplementary issue that must arise from the Vulindlela report may still go through the process of the executive that you have outlined. Why are you saying that you must get a legal opinion on this white paper? Because our understanding is that the president, when he outlined his priorities in the two sonas, the reforms, he appreciated that as a process of cabinet, where cabinet has approved all the inputs that must be dealt with. And there was an extensive consultation on this white paper process. So you need to articulate clearly to members. Of course, in relation to the national NDP, the last point is on the tax matters that have been raised here. What are those issues that you are raising? Members are raising this issue so that at the time the bill is being tabled in Parliament, we're able to solidify views and also as we enter to the public consultation with the public around the bill, there's clarity on what are the issues and how must consult, because at the end is Parliament that's going to consider this bill. So because of our main issues that have been raised, we'll start with the Director General. We'll allocate who are going to respond on the issues. Then invite the Deputy Minister, and the Minister will close. If there's a follow-up, we'll entertain that, but minding that we're going for sitting now at 2 o'clock. I'll just use my discretion as I will take follow-ups. But obviously, you still have to interact with this matter because you have to come back to the committee, including the matters that are related to the Border Management Authority in relation to the white paper. DJ?
No, thanks, Chairperson, and thank you, honourable members, for the questions, quite detailed and incisive. So DDG Mavuso will respond to issues that are related to the white paper, and then Mr. Segama on matters that are related to civics, Mr. Simons on the presentation that we made on Operation Vulindlela, and then Mr. Matthews on the general work visa and issues related to law enforcement. Maybe let me start by dealing with a question that was raised by Honorable Kojane. And I'll also attempt, Chair, to address the issue that you've raised around tax. I think it was also raised earlier by another honorable member. So, Honorable Kojane, the critical skills list is the same question that Honorable Mishu raised, but is not here at the moment. So the genesis of the critical skills list is that it's the mandate of the Department of Higher Education to consider a critical skills list informed by the human resource development strategy of the country. And what they do normally, they lead the process, do consultations with all government departments, industry, and then the process ends at NEDLEC. It's a NEDLEC-led process. And once that process is done, including Home Affairs being party to that, we then publish the critical skills list, which we receive from the Department of Higher Education and training. Of course, it does take into account new trends that emerge. It takes into consideration new industry activities. And of course, as the presentation was made, that the last one that was updated was actually in 2022, whereas the previous one had been in 2014. There was that lapse in the gap. Now, if you were to look at the critical skills list, Honorable Ngubane, you raised an issue around local skills vis-a-vis what we bring into the country. I think we need to accept, Honorable Ngubane, we're part of a global society. I was just checking with DDG Mavuso. At the University of KZN, for example, there's a study called quantum dynamics. And the leading professor in the world is Professor Petroscian Francesco from Italy. But he became attracted to that university because it provides him with a space to do that work. Now, if that professor was not able to come through that critical skills list, we would not have benefited as a country. Further down the road in Rosebank, Chairperson, we have a center known as the Center for High Performance Computing. One of the fastest, it hosts one of the fastest supercomputers in the world. And people that are working there are all international experts. And the reason they come into the country is because they're interested in the development of this country. So we must always balance our security considerations, development, and also economic considerations. So why was it updated? It's always updated, and the good thing is that the critical skills list, the minister can update it as and when there are new trends. And the last one was updated on the 3rd of October. It's gazetted, Honorable Checha. If you want to look at it, it's on the website of the department. So it's there. It's a gazetted document that you can look at. But for sure, we can share with you. Activities. And I said it here the last time that down here in the Western Cape, you have a Kuber, a nuclear facility. Majority of those engineers that came through to come and work there are from Framatome. And they're to meet the requirements of critical skills. And similarly, in the Northern Cape, those that are working on the square kilometer array. Honorable Kojani, you also asked a question around the 108. It's not individuals, it's companies. And these are companies that range from your automotive sector. Almost all of them, Mr. Simons, that are operating in Roslyn, that are operating in Rebecca, that are operating in East London, all of them are part of the Trusted Employer Scheme. Mining houses, the same. Banks, the same. Pharmaceutical companies, services industry, which will include financial houses and auditing firms. You also have those that are in the energy sector. They are part of that Trusted Employer Scheme. And I suppose at some point, Chair, we might want to share with the committee, if we do get the data, what they've brought into the country in terms of investment. So that's just a response to that. Honorable Ross, you asked a question around the shortage of staff. I recall we were sitting in the same committee in 2021. You asked us to put together a business case to National Treasury, which we did, and we were able to get 742 positions, which we were able to fill within a period of 6 months. So that was the first business case. The second business case, of course, the economic outlook of the country is not looking good. Treasury still has not responded to us. We've sent through a third one, and we were hopeful that Treasury will be responsive. So what is it that we have done? We've now entered into partnerships through Business Unity South Africa, and it is through this initiative where we've said to businesses, we understand that Treasury will not be able to fund every other activity. And through that initiative, Deloitte and FNB have said they're willing to support the department, particularly because of these critical areas. Those are not the only two companies. There are many companies that are keen to support the department. So the 35 young people are not students. These are legally qualified young people, similarly to the 16 that we've employed as the department. Obviously, that's not adequate. I think we did present to this committee and indicated that our approved capacity for the department is 18,000. We're sitting at about 7,200. So the reality is we can't say Treasury is not funding us. We're engaging various sectors to look at what can we get from there. And of course, on an annual basis, as we'll show in the annual report, we do lose a number of people that join other sectors. So they go through a period of training. They've just been trained, and similarly the lawyers and also internal staff, including training that was provided by Dr. Lubisi and the team to say these are the do's and don'ts when we're processing visas. And the categories that they're looking at are mainly your temporary residence visas. I suppose, Minister and DM, questions around the BMA, for sure there'll be an opportune time for the BMA to come and share what is it that they're doing in that space. And then I think there was a question from Honorable Mohale on the DNA test, the last one. Honorable Mohale, the requirement for the payment for the DNA test, it's more on the side of the Department of Health. However, for the 10 cases, I think Mr. Sigama will respond what is it that we can do if we do get the files. And normally, once there's a report from social development, we do waive the fees in consultation with the Department of Health for those that you have referred to. Just to correct you as well, Honorable Mohale, you indicated that there were Afghans that came into the Republic. They did not come into the Republic. They went to Zambia from Zimbabwe. So you won't find them in the country because they could not proceed to the Republic. But the reality is, as lawmakers that are sitting here, the current laws allow us to allow them into the country because of provisions that are there in the law. You will recall the former minister just indicated that he just shouted to make them go away, but the provisions in terms of the law allow them to be in the country. Honorable Mohale, I think if you read Agenda 2063 very well, it says the Africa we want. And it speaks about mobility of skills. And we can't say we prefer this to that. It opens up ourselves as a country to anyone, wherever they're coming from, not only from the continent, because there's a number of initiatives that we're undertaking as a country where we're benefiting from skills from all over the world. Just further down here in Pinetown, you have an office of the local square kilometer array project, which is a global project. And they're bringing skills from all over the world. So we can't be choosy in terms of which skills we consider and which ones. On the tax implications, so the issue that we currently are considering, we should be able to finalize, it's really around the general principles relating to the treaty, but also to cross-border work and profits that SARS needs to consider. You are all familiar with the fact that SARS needs to tax income generated in the country, and therefore, in our discussions with SARS, they indicated that currently they have a tax treaty with 25 countries on the continent, and then about 56 all over at a global level, and the rest of the world. So they are currently considering whether do you move from 6 months, or whether do you move to 12 months in terms of the tax exemption? I suppose for us what will work will be for longer, for a longer period instead of the current one. So maybe let me then hand over to the other colleagues, starting with Mr. Mavuso on my left, and then Mr. Skama, Mr. Matthews, and Mr. Simons. Thank you.
No, thank you, Chair. Just to be brief, Chair, Honorable Ross, I do take the issue around the criticism on the lack of evidence-based policy making on the white paper. So the supplementary work that we are doing, obviously, will cover a number of those issues. And the missed opportunity on job creation, exactly, I think the Minister did indicate, we're looking at ensuring that we have a policy and a legislation that will enable us to attract the right skills in order for us to grow our economy and create more job opportunities. I do note the issues I think Mr. Simons will respond to, Honorable Kuban. On the issues that Honorable Kojane raised, on the information on what public support was on the white paper, there are various areas. For an example, when we talk about delinking citizenship, for example, from immigration, you know, those are some of the issues that people were saying this academic administrative progression is a problem. On the issues of getting citizenship through marriage, for an example, there's been many cases of marriages of convenience where people, they marry, they get what they call, they don't even stay with the spouse, to say that that's one of the areas that we need to look into in terms of our policy. I mean, there was also an abuse of retired persons' visas. I mean, we have seen people as young as me applying, some of them even younger, applying for retired persons' visas. And in South Africa, we've got a regulated age of officially recognized age. But when someone was 35 years old, we actually intercepted one visa that was applied for at our mission a few years ago, about 7 years ago. Somebody was 32 years old applying for a retirement visa. So we've had that particular problem, and the amount of money we need for the person for the upkeeping. So those are some of the areas that in the public consultation were raised. Now, the slide 15, you're referring to asylum seekers to show good cause why they didn't apply, they're illegal in the country. You remember we've got people who are trafficked, you know, coming into the country against their own will. People who are smuggled and they're made slave in different areas. When somebody is able to get out of that environment, they're already wanting to indicate, you know, and when they cooperate, obviously, with us to ensure that we apprehend the traffickers, you know, so we look into their situation differently. So those are the type of people who have been able to give us. Those are some of the examples, but there could be many other examples that I could cite. Now, we do take the note, Honorable Mukhale, the fact that the white paper did ignite a lot of discussion, and it continues to do so. And I think it's very, very healthy for a public policy document of this nature. Now, you're asking a very difficult question around citizenship for children of illegal migrants who are born in South Africa. Obviously, there are some of those cases. We have had previous matters of like that are also brought to the minister for a decision, because what happens in that instance, when there can be proof that this person cannot have any other citizenship, there's a process that we ought to follow in terms of act in that regard. Otherwise, we will not leave people stateless. But I think there's a thorough engagement to say how do we then get into a consideration by a minister to grant an exemption for such. Then the issue of the first country principle, again, this is not sacrosanct. If there are issues at international level where, for example, you talk about countries have a relationship that you could actually just take, as you are correctly saying, that we agree that we will bring refugees for a particular country because there's a good cause that as a country we have taken a position that we need to rescue the people coming off that particular environment. Again, that's a political decision. Unfortunately, as a bureaucrat, I'm not competent to work, but I'm just raising the issue that those are some of the considerations that can be given. And then on the, I think, Honorable Mlisem, I do take the issue, I think the same way I've raised the issue around human traffickers and syndicates who carry out their activities. I think Honorable Musha raised a number of issues. Maybe Mr. Skama can deal with the issue of the time frame. But again, what I would suggest that also Yusuf will deal with those. Maybe just to conclude, Honorable Chetan, you're raising a very fundamental. We do have standards for officers, where we've got what we refer to office accommodation standards for different types of officers. But there's a historical problem that we've had, that some of the facilities that are new, some of the facilities are old, based on the fact that the accommodation there, for example, they're utilizing the Mthatha office. The Mthatha office is in the Heritage Building. We can't do anything about some of the changes that are there. It's protected in terms of the legislation, so we can't make any changes. But I'm happy to indicate that through the support of the Minister, we've had a conversation to relocate that office to the mall in Mthatha. There's construction work that will start for us to be able to do that. But the issue is just not specifically talking about Mthatha alone, but the issue of creating standards we definitely do have. But the bigger issue is that the type of office infrastructure that we get, I mean, we give the specification to Public Works that this is what we need, the office of this nature, this size, but I can tell you most of the time, you know, we get something opposite to what we're looking for. And unfortunately, in terms of the Kiama legislation, all non-immovable infrastructure of government belongs to Public Works. So those are some of the engagement that we continue to have. But also we're adopting a strategy that says we should not only about bricks and mortar in terms of where we're located, but increasing our mobility to go to communities, because we've realized that the issue that Honorable Mkhali is raising of children of South Africans who are undocumented, because of lack of close proximity to offices, people give birth, they don't do anything about it, they end up dying. They leave those children undocumented. So if we are enforcing a strategy of actually going to the communities rather than coming to us, that is why the issue of increasing the footprint around our mobile, also not only that, creating different channels. We did talk about introduction of kiosk and other options. So we are working on those things. They are taking longer. Some of them obvious due to number of reasons. Some of them obvious are budget related, because some of it we have to really rejig, you know, find a way to squeeze the little budget, because this department budget is actually something very difficult to comprehend with. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Honourable Chair, Honourable Minister, Deputy Minister, Honourable Members. Now, a lot has been said, but I'll pay more attention to issues of citizenship. Suffice to say that 3 types of citizenship. One can acquire citizenship through birth, wherein both parents are South African, and that child automatically becomes a South African. And the second type is more about citizenship by descent, wherein one of the parents is South African and the other one is not, and obviously that child becomes a South African. Of course, during the process of registration, just to pay attention to Honourable Mkhali's question, we have to look into the supporting documents that are being submitted by the parents. At times, you find that some of the parents, they don't even bring ID documents or those requirements as listed in the Act, and that then prolongs our investigation and also to make sure that that child is registered into our system. So to focus on the case at hand, so we would like to get the list of the 10 so that we go through all the requirements that are required, and at the end we'll be able to then categorize them and make sure that they fall into one of the categories that I've just listed. Then the last type of citizenship is more about citizenship by naturalization, wherein one had to stay in the country for a specific period, not less than 5 years or so, and then we look into the police clearance and all those other requirements that are there, including the language test, as one has indicated before. And once all those requirements are fulfilled, we then sit and have an adjudication committee that sits and evaluate and also perform the so-called due diligence before that naturalization certificate can be granted to that particular person. There was a question that was raised by Honourable Musha on how long does, once the person has applied, how long does it take for the department to deal with that? So it takes a period of 12 months, so that we then give ourselves time to verify all the documentation that are submitted by the applicants, amongst others issues of permits as indicated, and the IDs, the police clearance from the person who submitted documents from the country of origin, and that communication between us and that country takes a bit of time, but we've given ourselves a period of 12 months to make sure that everything is finalized. And once finalized, then a naturalization certificate is granted to that particular person. I believe most of the questions have been answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, Minister, Deputy Minister, honourable members. I think there was a request with regard to the criteria for general work visa. So an employer to have a foreign worker who's on a general work visa would need to show that they have tried to get a local person, they've advertised for the position, they've done everything possible to have a local person employed, and they're able to then go to the Department of Labour with the evidence to say, can I recruit a foreign national? If that's approved, then they can receive applications for a foreign national, which then allows that person to apply for a general work visa. The second issue related to what defines good cause within asylum applications. When an asylum seeker comes to our ports of entry or comes to the country, they're basically saying to South Africa that they need international protection, they feel they are facing persecution in their home country. And on that basis, we would give a person a 5-day visa to report to a refugee office. If they've been in the country longer than that period, they need to go to an immigration officer and indicate that they had valid reasons for not having applied on arrival in this country. So in some cases, we have people who've been here for 10 years, or people who are found to be illegal in the country, and as they are about to be deported, say they want to apply for asylum, to frustrate the deportation process. In those cases, we do an interview to say, to establish good cause, to then allow you to proceed to a refugee office or to take you to a refugee office whilst in detention. So the good cause process basically allows you to approach a refugee office outside of the time period stipulated in the Immigration Act. I think those were the two questions for me. Thanks, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and honourable members. Maybe I should start with the question that Honourable Ngubane raised, and I think some other members, about the good presentations and whether what we have presented here will materialize. Honourable members, since the Vulindlela report, myself, DG, and we're led by DG, the presidency has stocktake meetings that we go quarterly. You go there and they assess your progress. They assess whether the good presentations are being implemented. So that is, and then they give us a report card to the president as well of how departments are performing. So we are being monitored as a Vulindlela team by the presidency and treasury themselves. So there's a member of treasury and presidency, and our DG leads the team when we go to the union buildings. Similarly to that is that we present to our M, which is chaired by Minister. We also are monitored through the EXCO, which is presented by DG. So I'm not saying that the good stories will become a reality. All I'm saying is there's monitoring mechanisms quite strongly, not only within the department, Chair, but from the presidency directly. So let me get to some of the other questions. Honourable Roos, the one on SAQA, it remains a problem, probably for applicants, and the similar problem we had with the professional organizations that I indicated that you need to get a certification from the Engineering Council of South Africa, for example. So we have a MOU with SAQA at the moment, helping us with the backlog so that we can verify the SAQA certifications very quickly. But I understand there will still be a problem for somebody trying to get a SAQA report there. And I was just discussing with DG that we probably for example, we're using proof of application. Maybe we can consider that, so while we can assess the application, and because we have direct link with SAQA. So probably look at sharing the administrative burden of SAQA with the applicant and Home Affairs, because locally here we have a more direct and quicker turnaround time with SAQA than with foreign applicants there trying to get a SAQA certificate. But yeah, it's something that... Then again, Honorable Kumbani, is the one on the... DG spoke about the critical skill list. Yes, it's headed by, like DG said, Department of Higher Education and Training. So even though it's published by Home Affairs and the Minister, it's led, the research, the consultations is led by Higher Education. There's SAQA, there's NETLAC involvement, there's labor involvement, there's public opinion involvement, there's a number of workshops we have, and there's representations from, I mentioned in a presentation, the veterinarians. So that organization will submit a request to say, include us into the critical skills list. The Minister would then ask the research to be done by Higher Education, so etc. So what I'm trying to say is it's a quite extensive research when it gets to the critical skills list. And it's not Home Affairs who sits there and decides who should be on the list and who should not be on the list. It's actually that very comprehensive consultation process. Then, Honourable Member, all the questions on consultation, I was engaging with our advocate who dealt with the public comments that we received. And he indicated that we received very few public comments. We did receive comments from NETLAC on the regulations, and that was important. We went to NETLAC, we presented the regulations as well. So we have received some comments, but it was not extensive, and that's why we could publish the second amendment fairly quickly after the first one, because we could consider those comments and then publish. On the limit of the number for the points-based system, there's actually just a minimum number you should have. It's not how many points you get, it's a minimum, what we call a threshold. So if you get 80 points, just for example, or 100, then you would meet the criteria for a work visa. But I want to then come into what Honorable Moshe was saying about police clearance. I want to tie it in that even though you meet the criteria, that's just a technical criteria. The security, the police clearance must still be there. That's the first criteria, it's national security. So you might have the qualifications and all of that, but if we check Interpol, if we check your police clearance, if we check the local police clearance, if we check the blacklisting, the V lists, and you are then on any of those lists, you're not going to get the visa. That's the first criteria. So national security is there, and also we're not removing the police clearance certificate. That's, instead of, I was using the example of the 60-year-old, instead of from the age of 80 till 60, which is 42 years, getting police clearance for 42 years, now we're saying the last 5 years. Because we're still going to check Interpol, we're still going to check police, we're still going to check V-lists and all of that. So I think it's just a misunderstanding for the Honourable Member, but security is still there. I was just saying that we're looking at the administrative burden, lessening that, but not the security burden remains as it is. Then whether 108 of the employers were enough, well, we published for 1 month and 108 applied. And since we commenced in March, 71 is met the criteria and was appointed. And since then, there's been an outcry for more. So you are quite right, Honourable Member. For us, we wanted to start small. When you launch a new scheme, you don't take 1,000 and then you collapse and it doesn't work. So now with the 71, we have a dedicated team, and it doesn't just go into the stream of all adjudicators. It goes to a dedicated team in the large account unit that deals with employers' visa applications. Now that we've worked out the process from March until now, we know the team is fully acquainted, the employers know how to submit, and the communication is there. Now we feel confident we can open up again for more. And like DG was saying, all the big companies are there. For example, DG Ford Ranger was launched here. We always use that as example. And Ford said if we don't, there were 200 technicians that they needed to launch the Ford Bucky Ranger in South Africa. If we hadn't issued those visas, Ford was going to take that to some other country and launch it there. So that's part of what the trusted employer scheme is trying to do is to say businesses come and launch whatever you want here and we'll give you visas fast as possible. The question on the impact, I think the impact is what Vulindlela always asks us. We must measure the impact. And part of Vulindlela Phase 2 is actually about impact. Because as we indicated, once we now publish the regulations and persons become applying for remote work visa, we start using the points-based system, the startup visa, then we can measure the impact. Now we've measured the impact of trusted employer scheme because that's why we have to open up again. The impact of reducing the documents is clear because it helps people to apply more efficiently, less burden for them. But it's one of the areas, you're absolutely right, is that what is the impact that we go? And I can maybe just also say that the impact of the trusted employer scheme was so good is that when we had an outcry for tourist groups from China and India, we said, yes, let's use this model that's working currently and see how we can adapt it to the tourism market. So that is also impact we felt on this one, and now we're saying we can roll it out to some other area within the Department of Home Affairs. Who's monitoring the startup, new businesses? That is driven by DTIC. They're the specialists when it comes to business visas. They also issue recommendations and certifications for businesses. They're registered with DTIC as well. So we work collaboratively with DTIC when it comes to monitoring and measuring businesses. I've spoken about the police. I think lastly on tax, just to add, DJ has spoken about tax implication. Honorable Chair, you raised it. It's one of the key areas for remote work visa is double taxation. That's the issue that scares away remote workers, nomads coming here, that you work abroad, you have to pay tax there. When you come to South Africa, you must pay tax here. There's countries who waive tax for those workers. So we have to be competitive with that. Now we've been working with SARS, and SARS has indicated they can exempt you only for 183 days, which is about 6 months. But then they speak about treaties that they have, the exemptions as well in terms of the tax laws. So SARS is best to speak about this, but for us we want the remote workers to come here 6 months every year. Some call them swallows. They want to come here because the weather is good at a certain time of the year. They want to come and help us with the economy. So it's back with SARS at the moment to look at this because SARS was looking at 6 months. We can give you that, not paying tax for 3-year period. But for us, we want to issue the visa, yes, over a 3-year period, but what's the tax implication, Honorable Chair? But I might not give a very good explanation now, but if SARS is here, I'm sure they will do much better. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Tia?
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. I think most of the questions have really been dealt with by the technical team. Probably just to add a few issues. The first one is that when we deal with the issue of these visa reforms, I think we should look at them as enablers that underpin part of the achievements that the government of national unity wants to build. The issue of economic growth. And we have to balance that with the security situation of the country, because those go hand in hand. A country that is not secure can't grow economically, and you can't secure a country that is not growing. So they build up all together, and that is the spirit in terms of the Operation Vulindlela that brought all these reforms. And I think we must also assure the committee of our commitment of both economic growth as well as doing it within a secure environment. And because in the country, we don't have a problem with the movement of people. Movement of people is a global phenomenon. You can't stop it. People will move from one country to the other. The only issue that you have to deal with is the illegal movement of people that you must then curtail. So the laws, the processes, and the systems are meant to do exactly that. And the issues have been raised by the Vulindlela report, obviously then requires us to do some supplementary work in terms of the white paper so that all those issues are factored in there. And I think we take the spirit that the committee is raising the issues. The proposals, Honorable Ngubane, are actually not, Ferrari kind of proposals that are being made. These, in terms of global standards, are actually basic because we are playing catch-up. If you look at the issue of the digital nomad, it's something that's happening all over. If you look at the issue of e-gates, the movement of people, all those things are happening already in other countries, but we are trying to catch up. So we are building from that experience so that we can also catch up with what is happening in the world. I think also there is a difference between the issue of the digital nomads and as well as the issue of tourist visas. Tourist visas are purely for visiting. They have a set period of time. They are not coming here for work. They don't have any tax implications on that. One of the things that was introduced with COVID was the ability to work in digital spaces, which means you find a person employed in America, but they could work here. And when they do, they spend just on economic impact. First thing they do when they come here, they buy groceries. They buy groceries where? In South Africa. When they pay rent where? In South Africa. When they buy property in South Africa. Clothing and everything else. Which means that in terms of consumption, our economy then goes up. Which means that we're able to get more people on the job through this kind of investment of these people who will then come into South. So I don't think that we need to look at them as people who are just coming in to just take. I'm happy with the issue of the BMA. I think, Chair, you are quite correct. When it's time for us to deliver the annual report for the BMA, we need to come here and deliver it and say these are the achievements, these have been our shortfalls in the BMA. In the main, we are having a funding problem with the BMA. And I think it's something that we have canvassed quite thoroughly during the budget vote, I think as part of other portfolio committees that we have dealt with. On the issue of our inability to grow, we have a problem. And our inability to grow our human capital is not because we don't want to hire people, but it's because of the rules. There is a standard COE cap that has been given to us by Treasury that says you can't spend more than this on your cost to employees. And when that happens, you can't sit back and say, okay, I will operate in this way. We have to look at innovative ways. Part of building a digital first home affairs is to make sure that we place less reliant on human presence and place reliance on working with computers in a digital environment. Not that we are taking people's jobs away, but there is already a cap. We can't hire more people. Every time we have to go make a business case, you realize that, no, it's not going to work. So you need to look at alternative ways. And I think the partnerships with the private sector have also assisted us. On the issue of the anti-African posture in terms of migration, I don't think it's really there. I mean, if you are to, for instance, look at our neighbors in terms of when we're entering into reservations. South Africa is one of the countries that did not enter reservations. But look at our neighbors that we are saying they feel that we are pushing them away. They entered into reservations and no one said, no, you are being anti-African for entering into those reservations. So we need to observe those things and not develop just the myth that, no, South Africa is anti-African. I don't think that is true. And on the issue of the late birth registration, I think there is a problem that we need to look at. And I was whispering to the minister here that the process, we started by engaging Department of Health. Please make it free for indigents to do the paternity test, because you can't take it away. If you are going to take away the paternity test, I can tell you, you will have a huge influx. A father can come and say, these are my 10 children. They were all born in the same year, because it's biologically possible to claim that. So all those things are entered with an intention of providing an internal control that is a deterrent. But how do we make it easy? For instance, you will find that in the private sector, it's cheaper to do a paternity test than it is to do it with the Department of Health. You look at the turnaround times with the private sector, it's cheaper to do it there, it's quicker than with the Department of Health. So we need to explore those options and look at our regulations on how we can make it easier so that the children do not suffer whilst we maintain our internal control standards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, dear Minister.
Thank you very much, Chair, and to the colleagues who've responded, including the DM. I think that's really comprehensive in terms of the response. Let me just add a couple of additional points in conclusion then, if I may, Chair. I think this issue about funding keeps coming up, and I wonder the extent to which the committee may want to engage with Treasury actually on this, because we end up speaking sort of on their behalf sometimes, and we don't really have the answer. So I think that that might be something to look into and get the perspective from their side as well, especially when it comes to the BMA, but also some critical sectors inside Home Affairs. I mean, just this morning, just to latch on what DM says, I was speaking at an investor conference, Rand Merchant Bank, Morgan Stanley, and I made the point that no one wants to invest in a country that doesn't have control of its internal security. It's an economic argument as well. So I think it was well put to say that these things feed into each other. You need a growing economy if you're going to fund basically the reconstruction of our border management system. But at the same time, you need to have at least a minimum level of internal security to attract and generate economic growth. So these things do in fact feed into each other. And I think that's where the opportunities lie. While we're going to hopefully grow the economy meaningfully over the coming few years, generate the tax revenue we need, and then invest that into modernizing our systems, there is only one shortcut really, and that is through automation and taking the advantages that we can through technology. And that's where it tops up really our capacity. I think in this vein, the points-based system for work visas does have an interesting element of automation, because essentially what it does is it creates an objective set of criteria to say, if you have this kind of qualification, if you've got a job offer of R1 million, if you've got this number of years of experience, you know, the adjudication doesn't become something subjective. You can have a small spreadsheet or a tool where an adjudicator can simply say, yes, has this job offer, yes, has this qualification, and the points get added up. And it creates more transparency and certainty in the process as well. So these are small things, but that's where we have to start, given the constraints that we have. I was even saying one of the things we may want to look at is to create a little calculator. You know how SABC has a calculator on their website, and you can go actually and sort of see what the implications are for you in terms of tax. If we get this points-based system right, we may want to create something similar where someone who's thinking about applying can actually go and fill in their details and get an indication of whether they will be successful or not. And you remove that human discretion, the uncertainty out of the process. And so I think it's also exciting for that reason to bring more objectivity into how work visas go, because that's fundamental, again, on the economic side and on the security side. Because if you've got an objective measure and someone gets a work visa but they don't have enough points, now you can go and say, well, hang on, how was this thing issued? But as long as you have the discretion and you don't have that kind of view of how decisions are made, that's where the problem really comes in. So these are small steps, Chair. As I say, this is not, you know, fixing everything overnight, but they move us in that direction. I think just in terms of the timelines and the white paper, just to be clear, I think it was March 2027. That date was the original date. That's not something that we came up with. That is the extent of the process that would have to be followed, even in the space that we're already in. So it's a very extensive process, Chair. I think we have to be very honest with each other, because what I don't want us to have, and I think we can probably all agree on this, is we don't want a situation where, let's be very honest now with each other. We've seen bills being signed, and then there's more work to build consensus even after the bill becomes an act. We have an example from the weekend. So what I'm suggesting is let's find the consensus up front, because then we know there will be none of these issues going forward, especially in a space where we've got 10 parties that have to also find that consensus amongst each other. That's the reality of it, Chair, to answer the question directly. And my suggestion to the committee is let's do that groundwork now, so that by the time we put the bill on the table, we actually know there's not going to be things that come and bite us like we see in some other cases now. Yes, there will be a slight delay because of that, but I think it's better to do that now than to do it at the end and create a real issue. Just to also be absolutely clear, the work that Operation Vulindlela is doing and that Mr. Simons presented here, they really deserve a tip of the cap, because they are working precisely because there are not legislative changes that they're currently looking at. In other words, the law as it is written, the Immigration Act, for example, it provides for certain visa categories. But we are now saying it's the year 2024, and there's new opportunities that are emerging, and they are doing incredible work trying to fit new opportunities into the existing law. But there is a process underway from the presidency, including the work from Genesis that the DG mentioned, to actually also come to us and say, but in addition to, tinkering around the edges, for lack of a better word, what could be some legal amendments that take advantage of these opportunities as well? And it is those proposals that we would like to bring to the committee and say, let's consider them as part of the white paper, because then we don't have to come with 10 different fragmented bills. We do a comprehensive reframing, which is exactly what the white paper is looking for. I do, however, also just want to say, Chair, that we mustn't create the impression amongst South Africans that any white paper or any piece of policy is a silver bullet in any space. The comment that has been repeated over and over in today's meeting is, you can have good laws, but they don't mean anything if they're not properly implemented. And that is why I think it's so important to also be clear to each other that there are constraints on administration that we need to address, and nothing prevents us. There's no rule that says write the white paper before you deal with the backlog at the refugee appeals process, for example, that was mentioned. Those are administrative issues, and those are things that we need to move on, again, partially through resourcing, but also through the reforms that we need to bring. Because you can write a new law today, that backlog will still be there. The court judgments from the Constitutional Court that are, creating a space in this environment will still be there. And so I think the line is that we mustn't think that we can fix the administration through legislation. We must fix the administration through actual reform. That's the technology stuff we're talking about. It's the regulatory work that we presented today. And we must do both of these things. We must then have legislation that aligns with a fixed administration. But we mustn't confuse those two things, because otherwise you'll have a potentially fantastic law, but your administration doesn't mean anything in practice. It's not happening on the ground. So that's the perspective, I think, on that, Chair. I think that point is taken loud and clear. We're not defensive about it. The points about implementation and that you would like to see what you saw on the slide becoming reality is definitely something that we're open to receiving. We hear you loud and clear, and that's certainly what we also want. We don't want to be a department that gets told we do good presentations, but then that's where it ends. So we will take that on board and follow through aggressively as we've done in this process. And really, Chair, I think this is the bottom line. When we talk about the tour operator scheme, for example, to look at tourism from China and India, we must be able to come back here and say a year from now, whatever the case may be, what are the tourism numbers looking like from China? Because that's the outcome that we're looking for, not just the output. We can make a nice output on the screen. But if we come back to you and we say, listen, we had 93,000 tourists from China in this past year, which is the actual number, and we come back to you and we say, but you know what, it's now 150,000 or 190,000. That's where I think you're seeing the impact on the ground, because every single one of those tourists who come here are contributing to the South African economy and creating jobs. So I would welcome that, Chair, and I hope the officials would be with me. Measure us on those things. Say, this is what you said you will do. What's the real world impact? The same would go for the points-based visa, bringing those skills in. And Chair, if I may say on the critical skills list, the whole point is to reduce the skills shortage. We are trying to address the skills shortage as it exists and as higher education tells us that it exists. So the whole point would be over time that as you bring in those skills, the need for this would decrease because you've brought the skills, all right? I mean, you're plugging the hole. And then on the other side is the training aspect. That's not in a Home Affairs domain. But of course, we all want a world where all of these 21st century skills are being produced by our universities, and the colleagues here that are on those committees should really take this message from Home Affairs as well to say, the best outcome here is that we don't need skills. But the reality is today, we are told by Treasury that it is the second most powerful thing we can do to create jobs for South Africans in this country, right after load shedding, is bringing in skills. That's not me saying that, that's National Treasury's own research. So they talk about 7 jobs for South Africans for every highly skilled individual. So that's the contribution we're trying to make in the job creation space, which, as everyone here said, is really the apex priority. We understand it's the most critical need. And then finally, Chair, I would conclude by saying, on the civic side, we haven't talked about that a lot today, but I'm sure in other engagements we will again, to just finish with Mr. Mavuso, who touched on the channels. Planting the seed now, because I'm sure we'll get back to it, but please think about another channel that we need to create collectively at Home Affairs, is the idea of Home Affairs at home. Because we can build offices, we can form partnerships, kiosks, trucks, we can do all of these things which are already there. And we still have instances of people not being reached. That's where the opportunity lies, I think, in moving into a space where someone can access Home Affairs either from their home through a smart device, they can go to a local library. I mean, a Home Affairs office should actually exist in a community centre. If there's a laptop, for example, in an impoverished community. And creating that new channel, I think, is also going to be very important to making sure that even as we deal with the national security issues, we deal with the economic focus that we've spoken about today, we actually improve service delivery for people on the ground. And those are really the 3, I think, overall things that we need to be achieving. So thank you very much, Chair. That's it from our side.
Thanks very much, honourable members, and thanks very much, Minister, for the update. 2 issues we'll deal with. We'll monitor the work that we received here, and we'll call the department to update on the progress. We are going to interact with National Treasury during our oversight. That's a comment in relation to the issues that are raised on the border management. But we must thank members for having contributed and provided guidance on some of the issues that the department may need to take on. And we will conduct our oversight. The time frame is important, Minister and Dear. And I think the views expressed by members, you can link that we may need to fast track this process so that we are going to interact with the bill. Thanks very much. We'll stand off this item. And I will suggest members that we're going to sitting now at 2 o'clock. And I'm fully aware that both this committee is tabling a report, and I'm advised that also the ministry is responding or something. I'm not sure. Mr. Adams, I want to propose that we, and Mr. Matons, that just 2 reports are operational. We can deal with them on visual this week. Members will guide. It's the program on the marriage bill public here is intense, including the workshop of the public education. It's also minutes and also the advert on the party political fund. So I'm proposing members that now it's 1:30. It's 1:15, and at least you must be at the house by 2, or walk to the house from now. Can I suggest we consider the proposal I know you're prepared, the team is highly prepared, but given that we're going to a sitting now, can I test this proposal if it will work? Mohale?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think I support that proposal. We have to, some of us must go and recite our speeches. Thank you.
Any seconder? Honorable Mtolo?
Thank you, Chair. I'm seconding the proposal for visual. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, members. We'll then request the team to check the dates, a day where we can deal with this thing on the visuals. Only it's going to take us 30 minutes. It's not a difficult process. In announcement, Ms. Matters?
There are no announcements.
The matter of Honorable Ngubane on the oversight which you raised in the last meeting, I think there's an issue with the minister. I want also to deposit it in that meeting, to be an in-committee meeting. They will advise how we must navigate on it. I think it will be sufficient. I'm trying to, I accepted your request, but I'm trying to advise that we can deal with it in that visual. I know you wanted to raise it in the presence of the minister.
Yeah, Chair, it's the minister that must respond, so it's important that the minister be present so that, Chair, we have an official framework on how to handle those issues. Because what I've tabled here is what I'm constitutionally obliged to do. It's constitutionally quoted, and then it needs to be known in public as well on how do we deal with it. So we mustn't deal with it on frivolous, like someone else's experience. We need to say the law says, and the law allows this. The law does not allow this. That's why I said it's important that if the minister brings that issue, because why I'm raising that, Chair, we mustn't have committee that allows other things and committee that does not allow other things in the same Parliament of South Africa, and then we have a differentiation.
Let us work. Minister, there was an issue that was raised in our last meeting. I don't want it to be responded here. I'm going to defer it to the next meeting when the minister is in attendance. I think you know the issues. The DM, I think, was here in the last meeting to brief you, and also take our view on how we must handle this. I think that in committee also will circulate views, and then when you come in the next meeting, if the first item, you respond to it, deliberate, and then we close on it. Thanks, members. Our meeting is still adjourned.
Yeah.